Chapter 668. When Jiyu chased after Chen Yin, the leader of the carefree sect, to the entrance of the cave, as a sect with a long history, there must be some old fellows who did not want to come out. They had lived for an unknown amount of time, but in the end, they were unable to break through beyond the human profound realm, and their lives had come to an end. If there were no accidents before the opportunity came, they would spend the rest of their lives in a deep sleep. But they did not expect that when they woke up today, the disciples of the carefree sect would be defeated. They were the weakest disciples of their own sections. They were kneeling on the ground. After hearing the news, they were furious. It was because of Jiyu that they had no choice but to wake up. After waking up, it would be difficult for them to go back to sleep. So all the anger in their hearts was directed at Jiyu. It was all because of this kid that they came back to this world. The most important thing was that they could not break through to a higher realm. However, what made them even more curious was that Jiyu was actually able to break through their protective formation. Furthermore, it was as if the formation was just a piece of trash, disappearing without a trace. Thinking of this, their hearts were filled with anger. A person stepped forward. "I'm a fifth-generation sect leader. Feng Jia greets this young master. May I know what my people did to make you want to annihilate us?" He was actually able to shatter their protective mountain array. This kid definitely had some ability. As he thought of this, he started to become vigilant. As for how powerful this brat was, he had no idea in his heart. Ji took a step forward and cupped his hands in greeting. "Greetings, senior. Your carefree sect killed my people, so you want to annihilate your sect as compensation." So it was like that. The old ancestors breathed a sigh of relief and stepped forward at the same time. They opened their mouths and said, "So it was like that. This is just a small problem. How about this? We are willing to compensate with profound stones as compensation." Is the young master satisfied? Their eyes were fixed on Jiyu. It seemed that as long as Jiyu refused, they would not hesitate to kill Jiyu. Jiyu sensed their fiery gazes and smiled in her heart. This guy's killing intent was too strong. Even before she could say anything, he had already locked onto her. The lives of our dragon-slaying gang members are far more precious than you can imagine. This sentence was tantamount to destroying the last shred of hope for peace talks. If you don't want to give the Xin sect a way out, then you don't need to leave. "How dare you, young master? Brothers, charge." After shouting this sentence, they instantly disappeared. In the next moment, he appeared in the middle of the square. They opened their eyes, and the long swords in their hands were held in front of them. "Brat, since you've made your choice, we can only send you on your way." Feng Jia looked at the old man beside him. Xian skill, sword inheritance, heaven-sealing sword. After he shouted, he infused the Xian energy of the third level of the human profound realm into the 7th grade artifact in his hand. He was very confident. He did not know what the old sect leader was afraid of. He was just a young brat. How strong could his Xian energy be? After thinking about this, he swung the sword in his hand down heavily. The artifact emitted a huge light. With a loud bang, a white light came out from the surroundings. A huge circle of light appeared in the air. Countless long swords rained down like heavy rain. Ji frowned. "You want to hit me with such a slow speed?" Ding! The host used the 3,000 cloud movement, obtained 1 by 999 experience points. He instantly disappeared from the spot. However, Jiyu could not break through the circle of light. She could only retreat first. The 5 swords stabbed into the ground beside Jiyu, forming a circle. A cold sword light was emitted from the long sword. He said lightly, "Little friend, do you think my Xian skill is for trapping people? But you're wrong. My Xian skill is for killing people." Jiyu only saw the swords around him, stabbed into the ground. There seemed to be a trace of lightning surrounding those swords. He snorted coldly. His Xian skill, just now, was to completely lock Jiyu to the ground. As he moved, the ring of light burst forth. Like rain, the swords all fell at this moment. A treasure artifact appeared in Jiyu's hand. He raised his hand and waved it, shattering those swords. This treasure artifact is very beautiful. Senior brother, after I kill this brat, I'll personally bring this treasure artifact to you. The two of them looked at each other and laughed out loud. Jiyu suddenly raised his head and waved the treasure artifact in his hand. Ding! The host used Splitting Blade. Obtained 1 by 999 experience points. Ding! Congratulations to the host for breaking through to minor success in Zephyr Blade. Originally, it was just a gust of wind that carried an invisible blade. However, at this moment, the gust of wind blew in front of the other party, causing him to leap up abruptly. Now, Jiyu's gale was in full swing, and with a whistling sound, they realized that this gale was actually able to lift up the ground and blow it in front of the circle of light. With a rumbling sound, it burst out. At this moment, the circle of light cracked open. The strength of the gale was too terrifying. At this moment, the circle of light was blown away, and countless swords were stabbed into the sky. Jiyu raised his head and said lightly, "Kill." After shouting this, the free profound sex ancestor who used a sword took a step back. This was an array that he had built with his blood essence. When the array was destroyed, he also suffered a huge backlash. He coughed out a mouthful of blood. Junior brother, little 7. The people of the free profound sect shouted anxiously. Good job, gang leader. Long live gang leader. Gang leader Wangu Chongqing. The people of the dragon-slaying gang shouted one after another. Ji raised his head and instantly ran forward. He saw that a few of his brothers in the dragon-slaying gang had lost their arms. He picked up the person in front of him with one hand. He raised the great weapon in his hand and heavily pulled out his sword. The sword pierced through his body and instantly disappeared from the spot. The two treasure artifacts collided in an instant. They retreated one after another with blood in their mouths. She looked at Jiyu with resentment in her eyes. Kid, don't go too far. After shouting this sentence, their gazes gathered together at this moment. The patriarchs said calmly, Sect leader, we're counting on you. They looked at each other. Go to hell. One of the patriarchs suddenly exerted the profound energy in his body to the maximum and ran toward Jiyu. Suddenly, the profound energy in his dantian was exerted to the maximum. At this moment, the light also gathered. It was accompanied by a loud, rumbling sound. He flew backward in an instant. Jiyu turned around and said calmly, I never thought that I would be no match for you. He spat out a mouthful of blood. Jiyu's lips curled into a smile. He held the artifact in front of him, but he never expected that the profound energy in his dantian would shatter at this moment. Without his dantian, how could he self-destruct? Thinking of this in his heart, the corner of his mouth helplessly smiled bitterly. He closed his eyes. He never thought that after living for such a long time, he would eventually become a useless person. This made him feel worse than killing him. Senior brothers, I'll take my leave first. After saying this, he picked up the treasure tool on the ground and slit his own neck. At this moment, he fell to the ground. The people around him stepped forward and looked in Jiyu's direction. The people of the dragon-slaying gang felt as if they had flown into the sky. It was too exciting, too exciting. Their gang leader had actually killed an old freak. He took a deep breath and disappeared on the spot. He picked up the artifact in front of him and looked directly at Jiyu. I, Fengzhe, swear to the heavens that either you or I will die today. After he shouted this, he gathered all the profound energy in his body in the sky. Kid, my lightning summoning technique is the most powerful thing in this world. After shouting this sentence, countless bolts of lightning instantly struck the treasure weapon. Want to play with lightning? At this moment, he suddenly grinned in his heart, and the power of lightning gathered on his body. At this moment, the artifact was gathered on the sword. He brandished the precious artifact. It was as if a star had fallen, striking down the entire land. Within the land, there were bursts of charred black. At this moment, they disappeared on the spot. Jiyu held the huge artifact in her hand and directly charged forward. With a loud boom, the surrounding ground began to explode. Jiyu stood up. A loud rumbling sound was heard. The surrounding sounds began to explode. He spat out a mouthful of blood. He was such a powerful expert, but the wounds on his body began to turn black. He took 2 steps forward. Now, Feng Jihe was kneeling on the ground. The lightning that Jiyu summoned was much more powerful than his. This time, it was Jiyu's power of inheritance that killed him. He knelt on the ground and raised his head with difficulty. He looked in Jiyu's direction and used all the strength in his body. "Please, can you let him go?" Jiyu sighed and shook her head. She said indifferently, "I'm sorry, my brother can't die in vain." After saying this, Jiyu exerted a little force with the artifact in her hand. At this moment, the artifact suddenly pierced through his chest. Chapter 670. When Jiyu retrieved the artifact, he walked to the entrance of the cave. Under the supervision of the 18 golden puppets, even if there was a secret passage in the cave that could lead to the exit of this small mountain range, he would not be able to escape. In other words, Chen Yin was still in the cave. The corners of Jiyu's mouth curled into a smile. He stepped on a huge rock, and the Kuan Peng sword suddenly appeared in his hand. He slashed down heavily on the huge rock, accompanied by a loud rumbling sound. The huge rock began to shake with a boom. However, as the rock shook, the Kuan Peng sword was unable to leave a single mark on it. This attracted Jiyu's great interest. The corners of his mouth curled into a smile. It was a pity that everyone had forgotten the most important point when they were designing this kind of mechanism. They could only block the impact of the Xian energy from the direction of the huge door. However, they could not block the Xian energy from entering from other places. Jiyu glanced at his 18 golden puppets. Under Jiyu's control, the 18 golden puppets all flew up. They floated in the air, quickly rotating their bodies and arranged themselves. The 18 golden puppets all aimed at the weakest part of the mountain range at the same time. They all crashed into the mountain range at the same time. When the 5th golden puppet landed in the mountain range, a loud rumbling sound was heard, and the ground collapsed at this time. Seeing so much ground collapse, Jiyu's mood immediately improved. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared from the spot. He ran forward crazily, only to see that the Xian energy was right in front of Jiyu. Jiyu's lips curled into a smile. With a thought, 2 of the 18 golden puppets in the air flew down, one on the left and one on the right, and flew Jiyu into the cave. As soon as Jiyu entered the cave, he saw the limping Chen Yin. He lifted his head and looked in front of him. "Humph, I didn't expect you to be able to chase me all the way here." "Not bad." Jiyu smiled faintly. "Here's a gift for you." At this moment, he flung the thing beside him away, and his head rolled to the ground. A total of 10 heads rolled on the ground. At this moment, they all sucked in a breath of cold air. "How is this possible? How could our old ancestor die in your hands?" When he heard this, he took a step back and stepped on a rock. Suddenly, the ground began to collapse. He looked at Jiyu as if he was looking at a fool. "You can go to hell and be ashamed of our ancestors." The collapsing ground quickly reached Jiyu's side. However, the 2 puppets pulled Jiyu up with just a light tug. Then, they looked coldly in Chen Yin's direction. Although this guy didn't have much profound strength, the mechanisms in his hands would surprise you from time to time. Jiyu was a little suspicious of what this guy had built. No matter how she looked at him, he didn't look like a sect master. It would be more appropriate to say that he looked like a mechanic. However, these little mechanisms were useless against Jiyu. When he reached the end of the path, he knew that he couldn't escape anymore. Chen Yin turned his head and burst out laughing. "I didn't expect that I would die here today. But even if I die, this old man will drag you down with me. I'll show you the strength of a treasured weapon master." He slapped his hands on the huge stone statue in front of him. Then there was a loud rumbling sound. At that moment, the boulder began to shake and shattered its own statue with a single punch. A giant whose entire body was made of black iron appeared in front of Jiyu. This was completely different from the huge stone statue in the trial palace. Jiyu could sense a strong, threatening aura from this giant. It was slowly closing in on Jiyu. His brows immediately furrowed. Jiyu said calmly, "I didn't expect that you would have such a treasured weapon." Chen Yin laughed loudly. He looked at Jiyu and asked, The treasured weapon in your hand doesn't look like something that could be made by an ordinary person. I want to ask, who made this treasured weapon for you? Jiyu smiled faintly. I made it myself. I kept injecting my weapon spirit into it to raise its grade. At this moment, the two of them were like friends who hadn't seen each other for many years, greeting each other warmly. Jiyu smiled faintly. You didn't expect this, did you? My treasured weapon was originally only a 5th grade treasured weapon. However, by chance, I killed 3 mystical beasts and it became like this. She didn't expect that this kid's luck would be so powerful. She was really envious. You should be careful of this treasured weapon of mine. Chun Yin jumped up and sank into the treasured weapon forged from mystical iron. It was as if he could control the giant in his hand. The giant glanced at his arms and legs. He aimed at Jiyu in front of him. A long time ago, I knew that I wouldn't be able to break through to a more powerful stage. So, to be on the safe side, I purposely created this treasured weapon. There was no other purpose other than to be able to summon it and have it conquer this world for me. What a pity, what a pity. He kept sighing as if all of this was a very regrettable thing. After sighing twice, he stood up and said calmly, However, I created this treasured weapon. With this, our carefree sect can be guaranteed to survive for a very long time. I didn't expect that you would kill the old ancestor and half of my disciples. How laughable. He laughed out loud, and the Iron Man suddenly moved. He raised his hands, and 2 streams of flame shot out. The power of the flames was actually on par with Ji-Yu's raging flames burn the city. Ji-Yu suddenly raised her hand. Mystical skill, water, overflowing the sky. Ding! The host has used water, overflowing the sky. You have gained 1 by 999 experience points. The moisture in the air quickly gathered together at this moment. It became a huge water dragon and collided with the Iron Man. The 2 streams of flames and the water dragon tangled together. The 2 of them looked at each other and revealed a look of admiration. Chapter 671. However, Jiyu had more than one type of power of inheritance. He took a step forward. Suddenly, a small circle of light appeared under his feet. Wind Dragon, Fire Dragon, Thunder Dragon, and Earth Dragon. The 4 giant dragons were already flying around Jiyu, roaring angrily in the air. Through the hollow eyes of the Metal Man, Chun Yin saw that he actually had 5 types of power of inheritance. He didn't expect that there would be such a genius in this world. It was great to be able to bring such a genius along with him on this journey. Thinking of this, he controlled the Metal Man on his body, but now his hands were releasing 2 balls of flames. Do you think that my peerless treasure only has this little bit of power? After shouting this sentence, 2 small circles of light appeared behind the Metal Man. Countless bolts of lightning struck down in an instant, directly forming a small insulating zone, isolating the Thunder Dragon, the Fire Dragon, and the others. He saw that the Thunder Dragon was flying in front of Jiyu. His gaze was fixed on Jiyu. He decisively broke the long dragon in front of him, and with a heavy swing of his sword, he collided with the Fire Dragon and the Water Dragon. He flew up. Chun Yin looked at the Metal Man in front of him, and a smile appeared in his heart. At this moment, the giant stood up. He roared, picked up the huge stone sword beside him, and disappeared in the blink of an eye. He held the sword and charged in Jiyu's direction. He suddenly jumped up at this moment. With a loud boom, he slashed in Jiyu's direction. Jiyu raised his hand, and in an instant, dark force gathered in his hand. He disappeared on the spot. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared in the air. Jiyu waved his hand, and in an instant, 2 streams of dark force spread out rapidly. At this moment, the 2 streams of dark force collided with a loud boom. He flew out and said indifferently, "Kill." Jiyu said indifferently, "Come." At this moment, a loud rumbling sound rang out as the countless swords collided with each other. Then, they suddenly disappeared from their original positions. Jiyu's gaze was fixed on the other party. The corners of Chun Yin's mouth curled up into a smile. The Metal Man shrunk into a ball and began to spin like a wheel. At this moment, It flew rapidly in Ji-Yu's direction. It spun directly in front of Ji-Yu. Ji-Yu raised his hand and blocked the spinning wheel with one hand. Ji-Yu's chi aura was attached to his hand. Surprisingly, he was able to channel that formidable power into his hand. At that moment, he turned around and disappeared from where he was. In the blink of an eye, he was in the air. He waved his hand. In an instant, the metal man was also brought into the air by Ji-Yu. He flew in the air. Ji-Yu exerted a little force and threw him to the ground. Then he took 2 steps back and fixed his gaze on the other party. He said indifferently, "You lost." Chen Yin fell to the ground and let out a long breath. He fell to the ground and laughed loudly. He touched the corners of his mouth and suddenly smiled. "I'm satisfied. Even if I die today, I'm satisfied." He laughed out loud because he was too strong. However, he was already satisfied that his life treasure was still in this world. "I didn't expect that I would be able to exchange blows with an expert like you before I die." He took out a small metal rod from his pocket and threw it into Ji-Yu's hand. "From today onwards, this is yours. Treat it well." Ji-Yu went forward to check. It turned out that when he threw him to the ground, his chest was pierced through by a long black metal rod. He didn't lose. He just lost because of luck. Otherwise, the two of them would have been able to continue fighting for a while. He sighed and walked in front of his opponent. He pulled him up and threw him into the abyss. Ji didn't take the storage ring in his hand. This was so that the disciples behind him would have something to think about. At this moment, Ji disappeared from the spot. He slowly took a step forward. At this moment, he disappeared from his original spot. The members of the dragon-slaying gang came out one after another. When they saw Ji appear, they surrounded Ji. "Gang leader is mighty. Gang leader is mighty." At this time, the two of them were constantly jumping with joy, continuously raising their spears high in the air. Ji said indifferently, "Let's go home." The members of the dragon-slaying gang straightened their chests. As for the remaining disciples of the carefree sect, Ji didn't ask them to kill them. It was enough for today. However, the carefree sect would soon be swallowed up by the other sects of the Union of 10,000 Immortals. Ji's mouth revealed a trace of a smile. Who would have thought that by doing such a small thing, he would be able to destroy his sect? He disappeared on the spot. At this moment, everyone, after returning to the Gold City sect, Ji glanced at the cultivation of all the disciples. Seeing that their cultivation was not bad, he walked out alone. The members of the dragon-slaying gang continued to inquire about the carefree sect. Ji wanted to see what this little separated soul was going to do. When he came in front of a small piece of land, he raised his head and waved his hand. A small fishing rod appeared in Ji's hand. Ji sat on a chair. He gently waved his hand. In an instant, the fishing rod was waved out, and the line of the fishing rod fell into the small lake. The fishes were swimming around. Seeing that Ji was about to catch a big fish, Ji suddenly smelled a fragrance behind him. Without making a sound, he leaped up and landed on a place not far away. He looked out. "Give me your life, dog." Ji gently touched the surface of the water and dodged the attack. It kept jumping up and down on the surface of the water. That beautiful figure approached Ji and pulled the small spear in front of Ji. Ji reached out and grabbed the spear. In the blink of an eye, a loud cautious sound was heard from the spear. He pulled the girl into his arms and gave her a heavy slap on the butt. Chapter 672. The girl gasped. "Yes," Ji said indifferently. "You didn't beat me enough last time. Now you want to be beaten again?" The girl was the one he met in the forest. Ji took a step forward, and the two of them looked at each other. The girl said, "Do you remember my name?" Ji smiled. "You didn't say it. You just wrote a golden character on my hand." "Humph. Take me out to play. I want to see the world." The girl's identity was definitely not simple. The last time they met, this girl's subordinates had almost taken his life. A faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. "Okay." After saying this, Ji's figure flashed and disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already on the road. Ji took the girl to the street. She took a fancy to a gambling den at first glance and insisted on dragging Ji into it. Ji-Yu's ears were extremely sensitive, and after shaking the sieve a few times, she heard the sieve. Ji-Yu was about to say something in her ear. But unexpectedly, the young girl covered Ji-Yu's mouth and casually took out a few magnetite stones. Those mysterious stones were placed on the dice. Seeing this, he turned his head and said indifferently, "You shouldn't have bet so much." After shouting this sentence, the person in front of him opened the dice cup in front of him with a grin. Seeing that the dice cup was opened, the corners of their mouths curled up in a happy smile. Ji-Yu stood up and said faintly, "See, I wasn't wrong." After hearing Ji-Yu's words, he said indifferently, "Thank you, young master." At this moment, Ji-Yu disappeared from the spot. He slowly took a step forward. The girl gritted her teeth, stamped her feet, and snorted. She seemed to be very unhappy. Ji-Yu touched her head. He said indifferently, Okay, don't be angry." After saying this, Ji-Yu turned around and took out a bag from his arms. He put on the sieve and shook it twice. After he put it down, Ji-Yu put his Xian energy on the table. With a loud bang, the sieve began to shake slightly. Ji-Yu said indifferently, "Open it." The shopkeeper smiled. He was very good at shaking the sieve. He could always control the number. This time it was 2, 3, and 1 small. This fool gave me so many profound stones. It was simply the height of stupidity. When he thought of this, his heart was about to burst out laughing. However, he had not expected that Ji-Yu would point directly at the dice cup. When the dice cup was lifted, only 3 sixes could be seen on the table. The shopkeeper's face stiffened. He pointed at Ji-Yu's direction with trembling hands and kept saying, You. After he said the word you, his face darkened. He quickly calculated in his mind. The girl jumped into Ji-Yu's arms. He touched the girl's little head. When the two of them left, several people blocked Ji-Yu's path. Ji-Yu glanced at them and came forward. He said indifferently, "What's the matter?" Those people looked up and surrounded Ji-Yu. At this time, they came to Ji-Yu's direction. They unsheathed their swords, which were not even treasured weapons. They were just mortals. Ji-Yu's lips curled into a smile. When they saw that Ji-Yu was not afraid at all, they curled their lips. They directly rushed in Ji-Yu's direction. He jumped up and took out his Koan Peng sword. Ji-Yu didn't like this kind of bully. When the sword was swung out, there was no need to use any profound energy at all. The profound energy was like a small explosive wave that directly flew out, and a loud rumbling sound was heard. There was a series of explosions around them. They fell into a pool of blood one after another. They covered their chests. They didn't expect that they would encounter a mysterious cultivator today. A mysterious cultivator was so terrifying. How could they resist? When they thought of this, they looked at each other. With a flash of his figure, he instantly disappeared from the spot. He seemed to be very afraid of Ji-Yu. Ji-Yu said indifferently, "Humph." With a cold snort, he immediately disappeared. Ji-Yu closed his eyes, but when he sensed that there were a few people staring at him, he raised his head. He looked up and looked into the sky. At this time, those people landed on the ground. They looked at Ji-Yu as if they were looking at a dead person. Ji-Yu smiled. "Come at me together." A few of them glanced at each other, clearly feeling the threat from Ji-Yu. They were immediately displeased. "Kid, don't think that you're so great just because you're a mysterious cultivator." The corners of their mouths curled into a smile as they charged towards Ji-Yu. Right at that moment, Ji-Yu leaped up and waved her hand. Immediately, an incomparably powerful wave of profound force swept out. The thugs of the gambling den were all Xian cultivators, but they didn't expect Ji-Yu's strength to be so formidable. Right at this moment, a few of them ran over and shouted at Ji-Yu, "Don't do anything, gang leader." Ji-Yu turned around, and the people in front of her let out a long sigh of relief. Fortunately, they did not make a move just now. Otherwise, they would have been in deep trouble. The few of them looked at each other and started to giggle. "Young master, are you tired? These are our people. When did I allow you to run a gambling den?" When they saw Ji-Yu's cold face, their hearts suddenly thumped. Ji-Yu's gaze was too terrifying. If they could, they would run away. They knelt on the ground. "Gang leader, we were wrong." Ji-Yu said indifferently, "From today onwards, the Dragon Slayer gang is not allowed to do this kind of business." The few of them kept kowtowing and saying yes. Only then did Ji stand up and take the young girl's hand and walk out. The young girl didn't like to eat meat, so Ji took her to a few vegetarian restaurants and shouted at the restaurant owner, "Eat! Boss, make one." The owner walked over and said with a smile, "Yes, sir." After eating and drinking to their heart's content, they planned to go to other places for a stroll. At this moment, a few people landed and blocked their way. Chapter 673. "Miss, please follow us back." The young girl sighed and said to Ji, "It's a pity that I can't have fun today." Ji said indifferently, "Do you really want to play here?" Hearing Ji's words, the young girl's eyes widened. But thinking of the rules in her family, she could only sigh. "So what? My father will definitely not allow it." After saying this, she sighed. Ji laughed. "As long as you want, I will definitely let you play to your heart's content." The two black-robed men in front of them frowned at this moment, because Ji had already injured one of their protectors last time. They only recognized Ji now. One of the protectors took a step forward. "Who are you? Kid, you have already offended us last time. What else do you want to do now? The matters of our lawn family are not something a kid like you can manage. Your strength is still too weak." After saying this, Ji said indifferently, "I will definitely take care of this matter today. What can you do to me?" After hearing this sentence, the two protectors frowned. In the blink of an eye, they disappeared from where they were. They raised their hands, drew their swords, and charged in Ji's direction. Ji stepped on the ground. He directly jumped up, and a warhound's giant sword appeared in his hand. In the blink of an eye, Ji disappeared from where he was. He brandished his sword heavily. At this moment, the heavy sword chopped down. One of the black-robed protectors took 2 steps forward, and a purple flame appeared in his hands. To be able to produce a flame of profound energy without using any profound skills, his strength should not be below the human profound realm. The flame and the huge warhound's sword heavily clashed together. A loud rumbling sound rang out. The two of them flew out at the same time. Ji raised his head and looked directly at the two protectors. He said indifferently, "Kid, you have some strength." After saying this, the two protectors raised their hands at the same time and waved their long robes. At this moment, their long robes covered the sky. They stretched out their hands and pointed at each other. A small seal appeared in the air. They waved their hands heavily in Ji's direction, and the seal hit Ji. Ji did not sense any change in profound energy from the other side, but his own strength was sealed. The array within this array actually had a huge mystery. His heart trembled slightly. Could this be the legendary array formation? Thinking of this, Ji disappeared in the blink of an eye. After a while, he appeared behind the two protectors. Ding! The host used 3,000 clouds movement. Obtained experience points 1 by 999. Ding! Congratulations to the host for raising 3,000 clouds movement to mastery. Ji looked at the two protectors in front of him. At this moment, he jumped up and slashed down with the huge Kuan Pung sword in his hand. Another loud sound rang out. The sounds of explosions in the surroundings were constantly transmitted to Ji's ears. Ji said indifferently, "You are very strong, but it's a pity that you met me, Ji." The gazes of the two protectors were fixed on Ji. It was as if countless killing intent was locked onto Ji's body. Ji resisted the strong mental strength, but after a while, one of the protectors used his mental strength to suppress Ji. In the blink of an eye, the two profound energy in the other protector's hands separated into two sides. Two profound energy flame blades appeared in the protector's hands. At this moment, the protector instantly brandished the inferno blade in his hand and flew in front of Ji. Ji sensed this surge of Xian energy and raised his hand. All of a sudden, Ji's aura covered his body. He turned around indifferently. In an instant, he disappeared from where he was standing. He raised his hand, and in an instant, the flame collided with the Qi aura. The Qi aura seemed to have a strong suction force. In the blink of an eye, the flame was absorbed. "Kid, What a demonic profound skill. You use such a profound skill. I'm sure the union of 10,000 immortals will punish you. The young girl took a step forward and said to the protectors in front of her, "Wait, I'll go back with you. Don't make things difficult for Ji-Yu's big brother." The two protectors looked at each other. The young girl came in front of Ji-Yu and said, "Remember, my name is Lan Jin." After saying this, countless fragments drifted down from the sky. The two of them placed their hands on Lan Jin's body and disappeared on the spot. Ji-Yu snorted coldly and clenched his fists. He clenched his fists tightly. "Lan Jin, I don't care what clan you are from. I'm going to pay you a visit." Only then did the disciples of the dragon slaying gang arrive. "Gang leader, are you okay?" Ji-Yu shook his head slightly. Only then did they step forward and walk out. Ji-Yu looked up at this moment. He disappeared from the spot and appeared thousands of miles away in the blink of an eye. They looked at each other and said indifferently, "Young Master Ji-Yu." Two people stood in front of him and said indifferently, "If you don't hand over the head of the Gold City sect today, we will kill you." Ji-Yu smiled faintly and said, "You have to have the ability to do that. Boy, you are quite arrogant. Do you know who we are? I don't care who you are. We are the legal judges of the union of 10,000 immortals. You can't leave today." The corners of Ji-Yu's mouth curled into a smile. Didn't they want to take back the Gold City sect because of their magnetite? Ji-Yu immediately stretched out his hand, and a storage ring appeared in his hand. There are 1 million upper-grade magnetite in it. Hearing Ji-Yu's words, they put their hands on Ji-Yu's hand and picked up the bag in Ji-Yu's hand. When he opened the bag, he saw that there were many pieces of magnetite inside. There are so many magnetite, which means that you are from a famous sect. Ji-Yu said, "In the future, we will hand over a certain amount of magnetite to the union of 10,000 immortals every year. Please forgive us." After saying this, the two of them looked at each other. They smiled and cupped their hands. "Then we will take our leave. By the way, as long as this decree is in place, no one in the union of 10,000 immortals will dare to have any opinions about the Gold City sect." Chapter 674. Ji-Yu cupped his hands in greeting. At this moment, the rest of the people disappeared on the spot. After returning to the Jincheng sect, Ji-Yu thought that their cultivation talent was not high yet, so he gathered everyone in the sect. Then, according to the contents of the Book of Formations, there might be a soaring pagoda above. The soaring pagoda was divided into more than 30 levels. It could directly absorb the Xian energy of heaven and earth and gather it in the soaring pagoda. A few elders walked over and saw that Ji-Yu was reading a book. They walked up and asked Ji-Yu, "Sect Master, what are you doing?" Ji-Yu turned his head and said to the people in front of him, "I plan to forge the soaring pagoda of the Jincheng sect. This way, the Xian energy of all the disciples will be greatly improved." After hearing this, everyone looked at each other. They said, "Sect Master's benevolence is really comparable to the sun and moon. With Sect Master leading us, we don't have to worry about the Shrine of Ice not becoming famous." After he finished speaking, several people behind him stepped forward, looked at each other, and said faintly, "But it requires a lot of Xian grade and countless heavenly treasures. It's very difficult to gather all of these heavenly treasures." They sighed and came out. At this moment, Ji-Yu disappeared on the spot and came out with a giant sword in his hand. He took 2 steps forward and said slowly, "It's okay, I can find it." After Ji-Yu said this, they looked at each other. Some of them could be bought from various places with Xian stones, but the flying locust stone can't be found in the small wilderness, so we can only look for it in that damn place. After saying this, they looked at each other and looked up. At this moment, they took a step forward and bowed slightly. Ji-Yu frowned and asked, "Where is this place?" "Hell Valley. Where is that?" They looked at each other and said, "It's said that this place doesn't see the light of day all year round. Moreover, there are devils from the other 11 prefectures that were thrown into that sealed space. Later on, it was said that a powerful being sealed it." They couldn't help but sigh. They did know a little about the Shrine of Ice. At this moment, they looked at each other. He spoke to Ji-Yu indifferently. "Reporting to Sect Master, We know where the entrance is, but we don't have any Xian energy on us right now, so we have no way to help you." As soon as he finished speaking, Jiyu's heart started beating rapidly. At this moment, he took a step forward and his mind began to spin rapidly. "As long as you know where the entrance is, I'll leave it to you." Everyone was simply too satisfied with this new sect leader. They slightly bowed, cupped their hands, and said, "Sect leader, we will open the profound door tomorrow." After saying this, the two of them looked at each other. When the disciples in the sect heard this, they all walked out and cupped their hands in the direction of the sect leader's palace. Those Xian cultivators placed their protective artifacts outside the sect leader's palace. It was rare for someone to make such a huge contribution to them. They knew how terrifying Hell Valley was. It was said that no one had ever been able to return to the real world from Hell Valley. Early the next morning, everyone gathered at the profound door at the back of the mountain. They looked at each other and came out. Several sect leaders stood below the sky-piercing platform and stretched out their hands. According to the sect leaders' instructions, they poured all of their Xian energy into the sky-piercing platform. At this moment, Jiyu also raised his hand at the same time. He waved his hand heavily, and several streams of Xian energy were poured into the profound door. At this moment, the profound door emitted a huge Xian light. It was as if a powerful Xian energy was constantly emitting power, as if it wanted to absorb everything in front of it. In the blink of an eye, Jiyu disappeared in front of the profound door. Darkness. Darkness completely enveloped this world. It was as if nothing else existed except for darkness. Jiyu raised his hand and took out a long wooden stick from his storage ring. In a moment, the inheritance of fire in his hand lit up the wooden stick. This caused a small ray of light to appear in this dark world. Whether the flying locust stone existed or not, and where it existed in this world, no one knew. He took 2 steps forward. His gaze locked in front of him, and he sent out his Xian energy. His Xian energy covered this world and spread out. However, it was as if there was a taboo in the surroundings, and Jiyu's Xian energy was reflected back. He took a step forward. Even if he used the 3,000 clouds movement here, when he did not know where he was going, he would feel a sense of confusion. At this moment, he looked around. Countless gusts of wind and fire blew. It was as if countless fine sand had covered the area in front of Jiyu. He felt the wind and sand blowing from nearby. Suddenly, Jiyu laughed out loud. Why didn't he think of this just now? He slapped his hand on the ground. The power of the inheritance of Earth transmitted Jiyu's Xian energy into the fine sand. At this moment, Jiyu seemed to have merged with the sand and was able to see the world clearly. However, he sensed that there was a small city in front of him. This made everyone feel incomparably surprised. Just as he walked in front of the door, 2 black figures appeared in front of Jiyu. They carried a strong, murderous aura. Instantly, their gazes locked on Jiyu. One of them walked out with a ferocious face. He laughed out loud. I didn't expect that after thousands of years, we would have a new person here. They looked at each other. Jiyu said slowly, "Hello, everyone. May I ask if you know where to find the flying locust stone?" After hearing Jiyu's words, the black figure suddenly laughed out loud. "Flying locust stone, huh? This is simply stupid." After saying this, they looked at each other. At this moment, they said slowly, "You want to obtain the flying locust stone. Perhaps there is something you want here. Come in." Chapter 675. An enormous dark force was pressing down on Jiyu at this moment. The corners of Jiyu's mouth curled into a smile. Then he dispelled that power, even when facing the powerful dark force of the shadowy figure. She did not expect that the dark force would gradually spread to the surroundings at this moment. The corners of his mouth curled into a smile. Jiyu walked into the city gate. A scantily clad young girl walked out. Jiyu would not treat her as a young girl. Didn't she hear the people guarding the city gates say that the people here had at least 1,000 years of life? After Jiyu heard this, she disappeared on the spot. After a moment, the young girl's lips curled into a smile. 1,000 years ago, prisoners like us were exiled to this place. Those righteous Tao people kept teleporting in here, thinking that they could use us as fools to raise their own Xian strength. Fortunately, our Lord Sky Snake's Xian strength was boundless, so he directly sealed this dark netherworld. As she spoke, a few skinny people walked out. They madly pounced in front of Jiyu. The young girl snorted coldly. "Reckless bastard." After shouting this sentence, the two skinny people suddenly froze on the spot. A huge sharp sword appeared in the young girl's hand. She suddenly chopped down on the two people's bodies. After receiving the sword's attack, the two people were stunned. She disappeared on the spot in an instant. Suddenly, she stopped in her tracks and looked in the direction of Jiyu. She slowly opened her mouth and said, "This is a safe zone specially arranged by Lord Sky Snake. You're not allowed to kill here. Those who violate the order will die. On the contrary, there is a killing field in the city. You can kill above it, and you can obtain the Fountain of Youth by killing every day." Fountain of Youth? Jiyu's face showed a trace of confusion. What is this Fountain of Youth? We can enjoy eternal life here, but we will continue to age. Some people cherish their lives and are willing to exchange their youth for peace. But so what? A disdainful smile appeared on the girl's face. She waved her hand. A building beside him had collapsed, and on top of an iron bed, there were 7 to 8 dried corpses that looked like they were about to die. If you're willing to have peace, this is not a bad choice. All right, that's all I have to say. The choice is in your hands. After saying that, she disappeared like a ghost. Jiyu sensed that the weakest one here was still around the first level of the human profound realm. When he sensed this, he couldn't help but laugh. Countless passers-by walked out of the nearby tavern. No matter where one was, taverns would always exist, especially in this world filled with darkness. The hearts of people needed to be stable. Jiyu also entered the tavern. One of them raised his head and said to Jiyu, "What would you like to drink? Just give me a bottle." After saying that, they took a step forward, cupped their hands slightly, and looked in the direction of Jiyu. Not long after, a cup of blood was placed in front of Jiyu. At this moment, the two of them raised their hands and slashed their long swords in the direction of Jiyu. Looking at the cup of blood, Jiyu just leaned to the side, and the long sword slashed on the table. In a short moment, the table was split into pieces. He opened his eyes, looked to the side, and said indifferently, "Why did you sneak attack me? He has profound stones." After shouting this, the people around him all looked in front of Jiyu. "I am at the first level of the human profound realm. Thank you for your guidance. I am at the second level of the human profound realm. I would also like to fight with you." "Cut the crap. I heard that this guy is a newcomer. Maybe he is from one of those so-called righteous sections. Do you see any killing intent on him?" That's right, that's right. Why don't you count me in?" They all laughed out loud, as if Jiyu was the funniest joke in the world. Jiyu frowned. These bastards, did they really think that he was easy to bully? He stomped on the ground and disappeared in an instant. In the blink of an eye, he pulled out his sword. Looking at the precious weapon on him, he swung his sword. At this moment, a silver light flashed. The light appeared and swept across their necks. Logically speaking, the girl's figure appeared in this tavern. She looked at the two dead people and said, "The safe zone has its rules. How dare you break the rules?" After shouting this, she snorted coldly, and a huge amount of mental energy covered over. Jiyu stood in place and forcibly collided with it with his own mental energy. A loud boom sounded. At this moment, the two mental energies collided. Jiyu took a step back and raised his head. The power of inheritance in his hand instantly burst out. Countless lightning bolts, like small snakes, twisted their bodies and flew directly in the direction of the girl. The girl took a step forward, and her figure flashed. She appeared behind Jiyu and shattered those lightning snakes. She smiled faintly and turned into a long snake. She slithered on the ground and came behind Jiyu. She opened her sharp teeth and directly bit down on Jiyu's neck. Jiyu turned around, and the huge Kuan Peng sword fell on the long snake's teeth. Ding! The host used Raging Flames. Received 1 by 999 experience points. Ding! Congratulations to the host. Raging Flames has broken through to the small success level. The girl's teeth were burned by the flames. She sensed Ji-Yu's pure Xian energy and immediately turned into her human form. How dare you? Ji-Yu snorted coldly. They attacked me first. You didn't have time to protect me, so I had to protect myself. What is wrong with that? After hearing Ji-Yu's words, the other party looked at each other and slowly said to Ji-Yu, who was in front of him, in that case, it is reasonable. However, you have also violated the rule of killing. You no longer have the right to stay here. Just hand over the token I gave you. Ji-Yu took out a token from her bosom and tossed it at him. The girl took Ji-Yu's token and told him to leave the safe zone immediately. Chapter 676. The remaining people in the tavern looked at each other. They walked straight to the side. Their eyes were fixed on Ji-Yu, and a smile appeared on their faces. Without the protection of the safe zone, it meant that Ji-Yu was about to face endless slaughter. In the middle of the line, there were several black figures standing in the same place. Among them, there was a fierce look in their eyes. They raised their heads and looked beyond the center line. Seeing that Ji-Yu was coming, but he didn't have the waste token on him, there was a trace of ridicule on his face. You can go in, but after you go in, you will face death. Go in. What surprised these men was that Ji-Yu did not even look back as he entered the center line. The men beside him stood up and drew their swords. Are you going to kill him? Big brothers, this guy is very powerful. You have to be careful when we come back. After saying this, the two guards laughed out loud. Don't worry. With us here, we'll definitely make sure you don't die. When these people heard this sentence, their mood instantly improved, and they cupped their hands at the same time. Go! They waved their long robes and charged in the direction of Ji-Yu. The Kuan Peng sword appeared in Ji-Yu's hand. She turned around and brandished her own sword. Her sword collided with the Kuan Peng sword. A loud bang was heard. With a loud bang, the two people were repelled. More than a dozen people put on their waste tokens. They opened their eyes wide and fixed their gazes on Ji-Yu. At this moment, they were charging in the direction of Ji-Yu. Mystical skill, Earth Chariot. After one of the purple-robed old men shouted, the fine sand that was constantly blowing quickly solidified at this moment. The fine sand was quickly condensing at this moment. At this moment, the fine sand rushed in the direction of Ji-Yu like a wave. Ji-Yu chopped down with the Kuan Peng giant sword heavily. The giant sword chopped into the soil with a boom. At this moment, the soil gradually swallowed Ji-Yu's Kuan Peng giant sword. At this moment, the fine sand slowly entered the giant sword. Suddenly, a ball of fire appeared on the giant sword. The raging flames burned the giant sword as if it possessed a firebird. It let out a roar and flew out, breaking through the earth. At this moment, the fine sand was shattered into pieces. Ji took a step forward. Looking at the fine sand in the sky, he suddenly became vigilant. At this moment, he brandished his long sword and swung it heavily. A loud rumbling sound was heard. At this moment, the fine sand collapsed in two directions. Ji turned his gaze to the front. At this moment, those clods of dirt once again charged forward. Ji-Yu's Kuan Peng giant sword shouted out. Xian skill, lightning snake. After shouting this sentence, countless lightning snakes flew out. Those long snakes flew out at this moment and directly rushed in the direction of Ji-Yu. Ji-Yu turned around and instantly disappeared from where he was standing. After waiting for a moment, Ji-Yu flew up. The Kuan Peng giant sword in his hand called out the weapon spirit. The power of the Kuan Peng was not something that these small Xian cultivators could resist. Seeing the soil, the Kuan Peng giant sword roared and opened its bloody mouth. In an instant, it seemed like a giant mouth that could swallow the sky. It swallowed everything in front of it into its stomach. Those long swords were swallowed by it at this moment. Those people did not expect Ji to have such strength. Their hearts kept beating faster. Oh no, we are no match for him. Run. No one knew who shouted first, but everyone turned their heads at the same time. As if they had gone mad, They ran towards the center line without a care for their lives. However, Ji was like a bloodthirsty demon, following behind them. From time to time, Ji's sword fell and took away a life. There were 3 people who finally saw the light. They were now standing outside the center line. Those few guards immediately released their Xian energy. At this moment, their Qi gang covered the sky. They fixed their eyes on Jiyu. However, Jiyu turned around and opened his eyes wide. Jiyu opened his eyes wide and waved his hand heavily. Several Xian lights lit up, and 18 golden puppets flew out in an instant. They flew in front of those people, as if they would face death if they took a step forward. When he saw this, Jiyu's figure flashed and disappeared from his original spot. He opened his eyes wide. In an instant, he disappeared without a trace. He slowly opened his mouth and said, "Kill." At this moment, the 18 golden puppets turned their heads. The golden puppets in their hands raised their hands and shouted anxiously, "Save me." After shouting this sentence, they fixed their eyes on Jiyu. At this moment, the guards fixed their eyes on Jiyu's face. They turned around and fixed their eyes on Jiyu. They raised their hands at the same time and prepared to kill Jiyu. Jiyu had only taken 2 steps forward, but the giant sword in his hand was already brandishing in an instant. There was a loud rumbling sound. 2 streams of blood spurted out from the 2 people. They fell to the ground one after another. The 2 people only put one hand on the center line and closed their eyes in despair. There was no trace of a Xian cultivator's gaze. At this moment, they fixed their eyes on Jiyu. At this moment, Jiyu slowly said, "They're already dead. What do you think?" After hearing this sentence, the 2 people looked at each other. One of the guards said, "You actually killed them before the center line." But he put his hand on the center line. Maybe he will be a little suspicious. After saying this, he placed the center line in the middle of the ground. The few of them exchanged glances before locking their gazes on Jiyu. Jiyu took out 2 bags from her bosom and threw them into the other party's hands. Seeing so many magnetite, she was stunned. The corners of their mouths curled up into a smile. Then, he waved his hand heavily. They took 2 steps forward and closed their eyes, as if nothing had happened. Jiyu snorted, turned around, and walked in another direction. At this moment, there was a clap of thunder in the sky. Chapter 677. Jiyu looked ahead and saw a huge light screen appear in the sky. The lightning bolts continued to fall on the huge dueling ground. Jiyu stepped into the arena. A guard walked out and handed a token to Jiyu. Their gazes locked onto Jiyu. He slowly opened his mouth and said, "This token is your proof of entry into the arena." At this moment, Jiyu stepped into the huge arena. Everyone was sitting in the spectators' seats, and they were shouting nonstop, "Boy, are you going to participate? We can use points to gain the power of the strong." He pointed at the treasure list behind him. Jiyu saw the flying locust stone on the list and said slowly, "How many points does this flying locust stone cost?" 99,999 points will do. But in the arena, you can only get 1 point for winning a battle. After saying this, Jiyu cupped his hand slightly. Turning around, he took a step forward and walked to the front of the duel arena. They glanced at each other. Jiyu said indifferently, "I'm going to sign up." After shouting this sentence, the 2 of them looked at each other and recorded it in their notebooks. In the arena, a man walked out and put his hand on his throat. At the same time as this voice spread out, the profound energy also spread out. "Everyone, welcome to the arena. Let us welcome the great Lord Sky Snake." An old man walked out and sat on the chair. He waved his hand, and the crowd sat on the spectator seats. They had no choice. His strength was too terrifying. In an instant, they could only lower their heads. Only Jiyu was still standing. Looking at Jiyu in front of them, they slowly said, "Duel, duel." Everyone raised their heads when they heard the shouts. They looked at Jiyu. Jiyu slowly took 2 steps forward and locked his eyes on Lord Sky Snake. However, the commentator in the duel arena had already started to shout loudly, "Everyone, we're going to start the first duel. Let us welcome God of Thunder." A fat man walked out, and the profound strength of the 4th level of the human profound realm was suddenly released from his body, causing everyone to shout enviously. God of Thunder, God of Thunder. His opponent, Tianfeng, walked out and looked at Jiyu. They slowly said, kill, kill, kill. God of Thunder has 63 victories and has not lost a single battle. Tianfeng has only lost one battle. Who is stronger? Let the competition begin. After shouting this sentence, the two of them looked at each other. Tianfeng smiled faintly. God of Thunder smiled and said, logically speaking, the loser dies. However, Tianfeng, your beauty is indeed hard to forget. He smiled faintly and said, you are really too beautiful. If you can accompany this god for a night, I will spare your life. After saying that, the Thunder God's great sword appeared in Thunder God's hand. Holding the Thunder God's great sword, he charged towards Tianfeng. At this moment, Tianfeng disappeared from her original position and appeared in the void in the blink of an eye. Countless peach blossom petals slowly fell. It was as if this was the most beautiful scene in the world. Especially those trapped in this dark world. They were extremely eager to return to the human world. As long as they could return to the human world, they would definitely pay any price. However, there was no such opportunity now. They fixed their eyes on the room and saw countless petals falling from the room. These petals reminded them of the time when they were in the human world. Even God of Thunder couldn't help but be slightly stunned. However, when he thought of what happened before, his heart trembled slightly. Many of those opponents would die after seeing the petals. Thinking of this, he suddenly turned around and brandished his long sword, swinging it out with all his might. As the sword fell, he grabbed the Thunder God sword in front of him and slashed in Tianfeng's direction. At this moment, Tianfeng suddenly turned her body. The two bolts of lightning in his hands suddenly lit up. Tianfeng's mouth revealed a trace of smile. At this moment, the silk threads in her hands slowly flew out and tied God of Thunder's hands. God of Thunder was actually locked to the ground by these pink silk threads. She raised her hand, holding the long sword, and slowly walked in front of God of Thunder. She raised the huge sword in her hand and stabbed down. At this moment, the long sword in her hand stabbed into God of Thunder's body, causing blood to flow out. God of Thunder's heart was directly dug out by Tianfeng. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. Their eyes were fixed on Jiyu. Jiyu said indifferently, "Boy, you have big dog guts." After shouting this, Jiyu's figure flashed, disappearing from where he was. A moment later, he appeared not far away, standing on the stage. When Tianfeng came down, she glanced at Jiyu with a faint smile on her face. The remaining people looked in the direction of Jiyu. Such a thin and weak person, he's simply courting death. Haha, I don't know what kind of ability this boy has to enter the duel arena. To be exiled here, he must have a great reputation in the human world. I don't know what kind of ability this boy has. After the voices of the crowd fell, the commentator opened his mouth and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a new person today. This mister has never stepped into the duel arena before. Let's welcome this brave warrior." Duel, duel, duel. After 3 shouts, their eyes all looked in the direction of Jiyu. Jiyu said indifferently, "Come." After saying this, they looked at each other. "Let's welcome divine Sword Li Fei." Li Fei walked out with a trace of disdain on his face. "You actually want me to fight with this kind of trash? You're really embarrassing me." There's a trace of disdain on their faces as they looked in the direction of Jiyu. Jiyu said indifferently, "Who is the trash? We'll know later." After hearing this, the two of them looked at each other. Chapter 678. Li Fei coldly snorted, "Brat, I was thinking of sparing your life because you are a newcomer. I didn't expect that you would be so ungrateful. If that's the case, you should obediently accept your death." The commentator impatiently shouted, "If that's the case, then let's begin. In the end, who will obtain the final victory? Who will be the master of the peak? Let's begin." After shouting this sentence, the two of them looked at each other. The corners of divine, sword Li Fei's mouth curled up into a smile. He slowly took a step forward and waved the sword in his hand. In an instant, the divine sword started to tremble. Li Fei was an expert of the 4th level of the human profound realm. His strength was on par with the thunder god. He closed his eyes and pointed his 2 fingers. The 8th grade artifact on the ground instantly flew up. The long sword danced and flew towards Ji Yu's direction. Good. Truly worthy of being a divine Xian expert. His sword control technique is simply godly. Everyone's face carried a trace of a smile. At this moment, Ji Yu slowly took a step forward and directly grabbed the long sword. However, Li Fei was an expert in sword control. He poured his spiritual energy into the long sword. At this moment, the long sword seemed to have received an order. Suddenly, the long sword turned its head in the air and flew forward like a long sword. Ji Yu's Kuan Peng giant sword instantly went berserk. What a great artifact! Li Fei enviously looked at the Kuan Peng giant sword in Ji Yu's hand. A trace of jealousy appeared in his heart. But so what? As long as I kill Ji Yu, that artifact will be mine. Thinking of this in his heart, he turned his body around. He directly walked in front of Ji Yu. Ji Yu indifferently said, "Xian skill, windblade." After shouting these words, the gale continued to blow, and a gust of wind directly arrived in front of Ji Yu. Ji Yu's figure flashed, and he turned around, swinging his sword heavily. The long sword and the giant sword collided. A loud bang was heard. The 2 Xian Qi intertwined and retreated at the same time. The fierce wind blew in front of that guy. It seemed as if there were countless blades in the wind, scraping his skin. It was as if his skin and flesh were being directly shaved off. Hell's Valley was indeed worthy of its name. After suffering such a heavy injury, that guy could actually raise his head and lock his eyes on Ji Yu. "Brat, you really don't know what's good for you." After shouting these words, they charged towards Ji Yu's direction. Ji Yu swung the giant Kuan Peng sword in her hand towards his head. After sensing Ji Yu's hostility, the arm in his hand was already full of bones. He suddenly took a step back and locked his eyes on Ji Yu. Li Fei felt the heavy arrow in Ji Yu's hand and immediately looked in Ji Yu's direction. Ji Yu took a step forward. At that instant, the 5 streams of power of succession gathered in the air. Ji Yu had long wanted to try how the 5 powers of inheritance merge together. Ding! The host has used the Xian skill, Rainbow Sunday. The 5 powers of Xian Qi merged together. After merging, they turned into nothingness. No one knew how Ji Yu created the Xian skill in her hand. At this moment, the Xian Qi gradually pressed down. In the blink of an eye, he turned his head. At this moment, he slowly raised his hand. At this moment, the Xian energy quickly gathered together and flew forward. The 2 Xian energies heavily intertwined together. After a loud rumbling sound was heard, the 2 Xian energies collided. Li Fei turned his head around. He took 2 steps forward and waved the divine sword in his hand again. He directly charged towards Ji Yu's direction. Ji Yu only controlled the giant Kuan Peng sword in her hand. A firebird flew out once again and pounced onto the other party's body. At this moment, the 2 profound energies collided together, and a loud rumbling sound was heard. He took a step back. At this moment, he directly locked his gaze in front of Ji Yu. At this moment, the flesh on Li Fei's body was being devoured. He said indifferently, "You've already lost." After saying this, the 2 of them looked at each other. He said indifferently, "Xian skill, 10,000 feet, divine sword." At this moment, the long sword quickly gathered together and turned into a treasure. They raised their heads at the same time and looked in the direction of Ji Yu. They took a deep breath. Presumably, when Ji Yu's sword fell, it would be accompanied by a loud boom. At this moment, the 2 Xian Qi were intertwining. However, Li Fei's flesh was devoured by the firebird, and he had no way to resist. He slowly took a step back. Blood flowed out from the corner of his eyes. After seeing so much blood, Ji Yu took 2 steps forward and kicked him heavily. After receiving this kick, he instantly fell to the ground. Li Fei collapsed in a pool of blood. Everyone who was watching the battle revealed a trace of surprise on their faces. The shoutcaster was even more stunned. This is impossible, impossible. The divine swordly Fei actually died at the hands of the newcomer Jiyu. After they shouted this, everyone had forgotten who the divine swordly Fei was. They only remembered that Jiyu showed her invincible power and killed him. Sky Snake looked in the direction of Jiyu. The corners of his mouth curled up into a smile. There was only one battle every day. Jiyu took 2 steps forward and entered the capital city. A few people looked in the direction of Jiyu. A battle could break out at any time in this place. When they saw Jiyu coming, they drew out their swords and charged in the direction of Jiyu. The situation in front of Jiyu was changing rapidly. He flew up and saw a blood-red face in front of him. You have 1 point just now. As long as we get his point, we can exchange it for a cup of Fountain of Youth. Kill. A few people rushed in the direction of Jiyu. Jiyu merely raised his hand, and the power of thunder and lightning was suddenly released. Ding! The host used Thunder Snake. Obtained 1 by 999 experience points. Lightning snakes and the like instantly coiled around their bodies and gradually tightened around them. They could feel the binding power on their bodies becoming smaller and smaller. Furthermore, they also carried the power of lightning. Chapter 679. They sensed the power of thunder and lightning on Jiyu's body. Their eyes showed a trace of vigilance. They looked at Jiyu's body, as if there was a slow power burning their skin. They felt the flames engulfing their bodies. For the first time, they felt fear in their hearts. It was not the first time they felt the feeling of death, but it was like the feeling of being tortured to death. They felt a trace of fear in their hearts. Thinking of this, Jiyu slowly took a step in the other direction. At this moment, they did not turn their heads. Run! After shouting this, they turned their heads and ran in the other direction. Jiyu ran a few steps. There was a trace of a smile on the corner of her mouth. Countless thunderbolts fell at this moment. Accompanied by the sound of the explosion, they fell into a pool of blood one after another. Jiyu led the crowd to kill in their direction. After seeing Jiyu, they turned their heads and said to Jiyu in front of them, "We were wrong. Please don't kill us." Jiyu did not listen to their pleas. She just waved the long sword in her hand and killed them directly. A few men in short sleeves walked out of a building and buried all those people. The old man walked out of the room. After seeing Jiyu, he cupped his hands and said, "I'm the innkeeper of the land of slaughter." After saying this, he stretched out his hand. Jiyu took out a piece of dark stone and handed it to him. After returning to the room, Jiyu crossed her legs. She felt the dark force in her body solidifying in her dantian. She slowly stood up. At this moment, the power of the sky-splitting sword was flying continuously. At this moment, she was constantly forging something. She opened her eyes and stood up. She looked at the water droplets in the basin in front of her. Jiyu knew that several hours had passed. Jiyu stood up. She picked up the huge sort of Kuan Peng and walked out of the room. At this moment, a bolt of lightning kept coming. When the power of lightning came out, with a flash of his figure, he disappeared from where he was and slowly took a step forward. At this moment, they raised their heads and looked in the direction of Jiyu. They said at the same time, "It's Jiyu." After saying this, they fixed their eyes on Jiyu. Jiyu slowly took a step forward. The people in the duel arena naturally knew that Jiyu had defeated Divine Sword Li Fei the day before. However, this was not the most impressive. After the duel, he had been ambushed. Despite being ambushed, he had still managed to kill so many people. After thinking of this, they fixed their eyes on Jiyu. Jiyu said slowly, "I'm here to sign up today." After hearing this, the two people looked at each other and whispered in Jiyu's ear, "Jiyu, child Jiyu, we all bet a lot on you." The corners of everyone's mouth curled up into a smile. After seeing this smile, Jiyu's figure suddenly disappeared in front of them. The commentator stood on the arena again. At this time, 7 or 8 matches had ended, but only a few people were lucky enough to survive. The commentator continued, Next is the most exciting match of today. At this time, two people walked out from a side. They slowly raised their heads and showed a smile at the corners of their mouths. These two people are known as the Iron Wind duo. At this time, they raised their heads and showed a smile on their faces. They brandished two precious weapons, Wind Howling Hammer. The two people were smiling proudly. The commentators said, logically speaking, it's a 2 versus 2 battle. But today, we're fighting a 2 versus 1 battle. Let's welcome the newcomer who created a legend, GU. GU slowly walked out from another direction. At this time, the Iron Wind duo opened their eyes wide and slowly raised their hands. They charged in GU's direction. The match hasn't started yet, but the Iron Wind duo has taken the initiative. Even so, let the match begin. After shouting this sentence, he flew forward and directly charged in GU's direction. In a short moment, 2 gusts of wind blew. It was like countless knives, charging in GU's direction. GU coldly snorted, "Do you want to play with wind?" After he said this, Yi Zichen nodded. Ding! The host used Windblade. Obtained 1 by 999 experience points. After this sentence, the gusts of wind came in front of GU. GU directly jumped up. At this time, he directly raised his hands. At this time, the long sword turned around. The 2 gusts of wind collided with each other. A sense of uneasiness rose in their hearts, and they quickly retreated to the back. After seeing the gusts of wind, their eyes were like poisonous snakes directly hanging on GU's body. GU's body flashed and disappeared on the spot. Both of GU's hands burst forth in an instant. At this moment, he flew out and swung the long sword heavily. In the next second, GU disappeared on the spot, turned around, and flew out. He kicked the opponent's body, and the opponent suddenly fell to the ground. He gradually climbed up, and a trace of a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. One after another, they charged in GU's direction. GU slowly took a step forward. At this time, a ray of light lit up in the sky. A bolt of lightning struck down. It exploded on his body. At this time, that person's body was char-black. At this time, they were char-black. GU kicked up. With a loud bang, the Iron Wind duo flew out at the same time. They fell in a pool of blood and kept wailing. GU put the long sword on the neck of one of them. When he saw the long sword, he felt a chill in his heart. He said indifferently, "Iron Wind divided into 2, invincible in the world." After shouting these words, the 2 of them separated. Their eyes were cold and gloomy. Chapter 680. At this moment, GU disappeared from her original spot. The Iron Wind duo demons raised their hands. At this moment, a strong wind blew, and the remaining few people flew in front of GU. They suddenly raised their heads and said indifferently, "Go to hell." After shouting these words, GU suddenly turned around and waved the Kuan Peng giant sword in her hand. Following a huge explosion, a thick layer of smoke appeared in the surroundings. Everyone looked at the arena. 2 experts of the 3rd layer of a human profound realm against a young boy. No matter how one looked at it, they were in an invincible position. If it wasn't for the fact that GU's opponent in the last round was really surprising. This time, they had already lost the confidence to watch. When the smoke dispersed, everyone stuck out their small heads and looked in the direction of the arena. The Iron Wind duo demons were still standing in the arena with a shocked expression. With a cracking sound, their treasures broke into 2 pieces and fell to the ground. Now that their weapons were broken, they could only surrender or face death. In a place like Hell Valley, there was no mercy to speak of. The 2 of them looked at each other, then walked in front of GU and half knelt down. "We admit defeat." GU put away the Kuan Peng giant sword. Suddenly, a fierce look appeared in the corner of the 2's eyes. They took out a sharp weapon from nowhere and directly shot it in the direction of GU. Hearing the sound of something breaking through the air, GU abruptly turned her head and grabbed the 2 concealed weapons in her hands. The 2 of them quickly leaped up. God knows how many experts were soft-hearted at this time, allowing the 2 brothers to kill each other on the ground. They still remembered the despair in the eyes of those experts before they died. The two of them couldn't help but feel proud in their hearts. They raised their hands at the same time, and a gust of wind-Xian energy with a great compression force spiraled in their hands. As long as this attack hit, no matter who you are, you won't be able to escape. Thinking of this, the two of them were about to laugh out loud. However, Ji suddenly disappeared and appeared behind the two of them in the blink of an eye. Ding! The host used the Dark Forest and gained 1 by 999 experience points. He appeared behind the two of them. His face was like an evil spirit from hell. The Iron Wind duo demons, who had killed countless people, showed fear in their eyes when they saw Ji. A silver light flashed. With a loud cracking sound, the two of them fell heavily to the ground. Their bones and flesh were all sent flying by Ji. Looking at this bloody scene, a trace of fear appeared in the eyes of the crowd. They fell to the ground. Spitting out a mouthful of blood, Ji sheathed his giant sword. After witnessing Ji's decisive killing spree, everyone began to shout crazily. Blood was nothing in their eyes. They kept cheering. At the same time, in the two private rooms on the second floor, Tian Fong looked at Ji, who was far away in the arena, with a smile on her face. I never thought that there would be such a godly person in this world. The person beside her also slowly said, "That's right, young master. What should we do next?" "Don't worry. You might become a part of our plan." "Yes." In the other private room, a man wearing a golden mask stood in the arena. Looking deeply in the direction of the arena, he said coldly, "This is really interesting." He said indifferently, "Ji, will you be a good opponent for me?" The commentator stood in the arena, and after getting people to clean up, he shouted loudly, "Next, let's welcome the next duel. First, let's welcome Huang Jinjian." Ji was about to leave the arena, but when she saw Huang Jinjian, she stopped and turned around. Huang Jinjian, who was in the arena, also looked in Ji's direction, and the corners of his mouth curled into a smile. The two of them looked into each other's eyes. The commentator shouted impatiently, "Let's welcome Huang Jinjian. Let's welcome the next contestant, the giant demon butcher." A giant that was 120 feet tall stepped into the middle of the arena. It was as if the entire ground was shaking. The surrounding crowd kept shouting, "Giant demon, giant demon, giant demon, giant demon." The giant demon butcher slapped his chest. "Huang Jinjian, is it?" After the commentator announced the start of the duel, the giant demon butcher charged forward. The giant devil butcher was the first to charge forward. Who would have thought that such a tall and big body could actually possess such outstanding speed? Ji thought that perhaps she had made the right choice in coming here. Here, she could accumulate more than just an increase in profound strength. She could also gain a wealth of battle experience. The giant demon butcher had actually created 3 afterimages in the middle of the stage. No one knew which afterimage was the real giant demon. When Ji saw this, the corners of her mouth curled into a smile. However, this giant demon butcher really underestimated Huang Jinjian. That person was still standing in the same spot with his hands on his hips. He closed his eyes and did not move at all. The 3 afterimages attacked at the same time, and 3 huge iron fists directly hit Huang Jinjian. Huang Jinjian turned around in an instant and raised his hands. He grabbed the opponent's iron fists, and the iron fists let out a loud cracking sound. The sound of bones breaking echoed throughout the hall. At this moment, the giant demon butcher fell to the ground and spat out a mouthful of blood. Blood continuously flowed down from his mouth. His gaze looked in the direction of Ji. As if he was provoking Ji, his gaze locked onto Ji. Ji suddenly turned her head. At this moment, her figure disappeared from the spot. Ji disappeared from the hunting ground. When she walked out, 2 people came forward and said to Ji, "We are from the Safety Alliance. I wonder if Brother Ji is interested in joining us." Ji shook her head. The 2 people said anxiously, "We still have some treasures here. If Brother Ji is interested, we can contribute them." "Why choose me? Huang Jinjian is more suitable than me." "That's not the case. We just want to be safe in this hell. We were sent here because we oppose the union of 10,000 immortals. We are not evil people. Please. The two people kneeled on the ground. Jiyu's heart softened. She said to the two of them, "Take me to sea." Chapter 681. Even in this bottomless hell, 1,000 years had allowed this group of people to settle down. The place where they lived was not far from the hunting ground. Usually, no one would bother to fight with them. After all, they knew that they would give birth to offspring, so when they were free, they would come and bully them. A small village appeared in front of Jiyu. Two men in armor stood at the entrance of the village. The bright moon shines in the sky. I have my freedom. The two men in front of Jiyu were Dinyo and Xiaonyo. They looked at each other, and after giving a secret signal to the guards, they let them in. There were two people standing in the tall buildings on both sides. There was a bloody aura in their eyes. He said faintly, "This is the expert we invited from the hunting ground. As long as he is here, we will improve a lot in the future." Dinyo introduced him to everyone excitedly. Men, women, old, and young all looked in the direction of Jiyu. No one knew what they were thinking. Their eyes were cast on Jiyu. A man walked out and said, "My name is Gugalao. I would like to learn from you." After shouting this sentence, Gugalao flew in the direction of Jiyu and swung a heavy punch at Jiyu's head. If Dinyo and Xiaonyo were fooled, they would have lost the treasure for nothing. In this dark land, they were actually able to grow things. This had attracted the attention of the surrounding forces of the Alliance of Torturers. If it were not for the fact that they did not know how to grow these crops, the hundreds of people living here would have been killed long ago. They did not want to be controlled by others, so they wanted a strong person to be their leader. And now, Jiyu seemed to be very suitable for this position. Jiyu naturally knew that he did not want to kill. He was only at the first level of the Spirit Profound realm, but he was considered a top expert outside. Here, he could only be bullied. Jiyu raised her hand, caught Gugalao's blow, and then threw him to the ground, only to see Gorgeso spit out a mouthful of blood. When the rest of the people saw that one of their own was injured, they immediately became vigilant. Although they wanted an expert to take charge, they didn't want to be oppressed by one person. Their eyes were fixed on Jiyu. One by one, they took out their treasures. Groglaw's men shouted anxiously, "Wait!" After shouting these words, everyone's gazes fell on him. He touched his body. "My previous injuries have actually healed." Just now, when Jiyu took action, she injected a burst of profound energy into Gugalao's body and opened up his blood vessels that were blocked by blood clots. With a face full of admiration, Gugalao said, "Young master is indeed unparalleled in the world. This humble one admires you." The remaining people looked at each other. For an expert, it was already a miracle that he was willing to protect them. Now that he was willing to help them heal their injuries, it was even better. After thinking of this in their hearts, a smile appeared on the corners of their mouths one after another. They slowly opened their mouths and said, "Greetings to young Master Jiyu." While they were talking, a few cries of profound beasts came from outside the door. Everyone turned their heads and looked outside at the same time. A person in charge of guarding the village gate ran in anxiously. "Not good. Not good. The people of the Alliance of Torturers are here." Just as he finished speaking, several people riding Xian beasts ran in. However, those Xian beasts were all pitch black, and their eyes were filled with a bloodthirsty light. Their leader said slowly, "Give us one virgin from each family and 500 stalks of Xianling grass from each family." Dinyo took the lead and stepped out. "We won't listen to you anymore." The man rubbed his ears as if he had heard wrongly. A sinister smile appeared on his face. "Courting death." After shouting this sentence, the two people beside him slowly walked out. Holding huge, profound swords in their hands, they heavily chopped down in the direction of Jiyu. Jiyu's figure flashed and disappeared from the spot in an instant. After waiting for a while, she reappeared on the spot with a human head in her hand. Ding! The host used the dark forest and gained 1 by 999 experience points. The wind blew again. Seeing that their leader's head had been chopped off, they looked at each other and said indifferently, "Boy, how dare you kill the people of the Alliance of Torturers? Good boy, just you wait." They urged their profound beasts to run in another direction. Daniel and Xiao came forward worriedly. What should we do now? When they go back, they will definitely ask all the experts to take action. Yes, the people of the Alliance of Torturers are not ordinary people. Once they suffer a loss, the whole sect will take action together. Everyone said anxiously. Ji said indifferently, "Don't worry, let them come. There has to be a decision made." Hearing this, everyone looked at each other and felt that it was very reasonable. Suddenly, they had an idea. At this moment, the bugle horn was blown, and the humming sound covered the entire square. The entire ground seemed to be trembling as countless fireballs came crashing down in their direction. Ji's aura covered her entire body at that moment, shielding her from the onslaught of fireballs. The fireballs fell on the Qi gang one after another. A few fireballs fell on the side and smashed in the direction of the entrance of the village, burning the whole gate. The rest of the people rode their profound beasts and ran in. The leader was a guy with a full beard. He said indifferently, "Who killed my people? Come out obediently." Ji said indifferently, "It was me." "Good boy, you have guts. But even so, you still have to die. I will first chop off your left arm, and then let you eat it until you die." "Haha, if you have the ability, you can try," Ji said indifferently, as if she didn't care about him at all. Hearing this, a ball of anger in his heart rushed to his head. He raised his hand and shouted loudly, "Brothers, kill them all." After the bearded leader shouted these words, the rest of the people patted their profound beasts and flew forward. Ji was about to go forward and fight when Daniel, Xiao and Gugalao said, "Leader, let us go." Chapter 682. Daniel and Xiao stared at the people who had always invaded their village. "You're courting death." The bearded leader of the League of Torturers had to admit that Ji had some ability. However, Ji's ability didn't mean that these rotten fish and shrimps had the same ability, not to mention challenging them. Along with the whistling of the horns, the two sides clashed almost instantly. Before Daniel and Xiao charged forward, Ji suddenly stopped them. At the same time, she tossed them 2 pills. Boom, boom. Following the 3 loud noises, everyone looked in the direction of the noises. It turned out that Daniel's Xian strength had increased to the 2nd layer of the human profound realm. Although Xiao didn't immediately increase his level like his elder brother after taking Ji's pills, he also gained a huge amount of power. He was only 1 step away from the 2nd layer of the human profound realm. Although Ji was only at the 3rd layer of the human profound realm, the power in her body couldn't be underestimated. She had 5 kinds of power of inheritance, and each of them had increased to the 3rd layer of the human profound realm, which was even more terrifying than a 6th layer of the human profound realm expert. Moreover, Ji was an alchemist, so the pills in her hands naturally couldn't be underestimated. At this time, Daniel only felt that there was a supreme power in his body. He picked up the big iron hammer in front of him and smashed it down heavily. With a loud bang, a person from the League of Torturers let out a scream. Suddenly, no one dared to come close to him. However, the League of Torturers was famous for their cruelty, so how could they stop because of a small league of protectors? A man who had been transformed from black iron pushed aside his companions in front of him. "You dare to challenge us?" The Black Iron Man felt that he had been greatly insulted. He roared and rushed forward. Although his body was huge, he was still very agile. Daniel dodged to the side and dodged the punch. Then, he quickly twisted his body and threw another punch. A loud bang was heard. The Iron Man didn't dodge. He turned his body with his incomparably agile body movement and threw another punch. The collision of profound energy did not produce any trace of light. The strength of the human profound realm was naturally very strong, and the power that erupted from the 2 of them directly destroyed their clothes. The 2 of them didn't expect that the other party would be so strong. Both of them retreated and looked at each other. "Brat, you're courting death." Black Iron Man shouted anxiously. "That's right. My family and friends are here. How could I let you destroy them so easily?" Daniel shouted confidently. However, The Black Iron Man was no longer in a hurry. Instead, he looked at him with a playful gaze. Do you know that as long as a person has something to worry about, it's equivalent to having a weakness? Brat, if you want to fight to the death with me, you should take a look at who you are. After ridiculing him in disdain, he hit his own arm with his palm, and his entire arm flew out. Without the support of Xian energy, the two Xian energies quickly lost contact, and Dinyo's body flew in his direction. Dinyo could clearly see that the Black Iron Man had taken out another iron arm from where his arm had been cut off. Xiaonyo's situation wasn't much better than Dinyo's. He was also a strength-type Xian cultivator, but a terrifying scene appeared just now. It was as if a man in a long robe with a terrifying face appeared behind him. When Xiaonyo turned around and waved his precious weapon, the feminine man disappeared in an instant. Xiaonyo looked around vigilantly. Bloodwarden Spear, a superior 8th grade precious weapon. I like it very much. Why don't you give it to me, and I'll forgive your sins? This was the precious weapon that his father handed to him before he died. How could Xiaonyo dare to give it up? Their figures flashed and disappeared. The next moment, he appeared behind Xiaonyo. It seems that you don't want to hand over the precious weapon. I'll have to kill you and take it. After shouting this sentence, he raised his hands and waved them heavily in Xiaonyo's direction. Xiaonyo subconsciously raised the precious weapon in his hand to block, but he didn't expect that the feminine man's precious weapon would become illusory. It went through Xiaonyo's precious weapon, and the power of this attack was actually attacking his soul. Unlike the opponents that the two brothers encountered, Gugu Lao encountered almost no one who was his opponent. After taking the precious weapon and medicinal pills that Jiyu gave him, he felt a burst of power in his body. Holding the 8th grade precious weapon, the Hurricane Longsword, even if the other people's Xian strength was better than his, their precious weapons would break one after another when they fought against him. The bearded man sneered and waved his hand heavily. Suddenly, hundreds of people rushed in Gugu Lao's direction. As the saying goes, 2 fists are no match for 4 palms. After more and more enemies joined the battle, the relaxed smile on his face suddenly disappeared. At the same time, he became flustered. When the battle had just started, Jiyu directly attacked the bearded man. As the saying goes, to catch bandits, first catch the leader. The bearded man's mount, a white tiger, showed a trace of disdain in its eyes. At the same time, it slapped the mystical beast below it. In an instant, the bearded man jumped up and flew in Jiyu's direction. Ding! The host used 10,000 dust return to 1. Obtained experience points won by 999. The sand and stones that had gathered in the surroundings immediately gathered together and solidified. Defensive mystical skill, how ignorant. The corners of his mouth showed a trace of disdain. Accompanied by a loud sound, that person quickly twisted his body and landed on the ground. Kill! Accompanied by a shout, the 2 people beside him directly rushed in Jiyu's direction to kill. Unfortunately, they were facing Jiyu. Jiyu just stretched out her hand in the shape of a sword and waved in the direction of the 2 people. Immediately, 2 earth dragons flew out from the earth wall and wrapped around the 2 people in front of her. Accompanied by Jiyu's heavy hand, the 2 people felt as if their bones were being torn apart. The 2 people flew away and looked in the direction of Jiyu with fear in their eyes. The attack just now made them feel as if they were in a sea of fire. Rolling on the ground, the bearded leader only said a word of trash, and the mystical beast below him bit off their necks. The alliance of torturers did not need injured people. His body heavily hit Jiyu's earth wall. Only one of his hands could be seen breaking through Jiyu's earth wall. However, this action only caused his hands to be completely trapped by the earth wall. The white tiger abandoned the 2 corpses and flew in front of Jiyu. It turned into 2 tornadoes and hit the earth wall. Holding the bearded leader's collar in its mouth, it landed not far away. The bearded leader sneered and said, "You're not bad. Join us." Jiyu wondered if there was something wrong with her ears. How could she hear such a ridiculous thing? Look at your companions. You have no chance of winning. Wait until my companions escape. However, he never expected Ji to still have a smile on her face. Ding! The host used 18 golden puppets. Obtained one by 999 experience. The 18 golden puppets flew out in an instant. 2 puppets flew in the direction of Dinyo and Xiaonyo. The Black Iron Man was planning to use his broken arm to kill Dinyo. Dinyo was disheartened at this time. If it wasn't for Ji help, he would have died at their hands. How could he have a chance to fight? Thinking of this, he couldn't help but laugh. One of the 18 golden puppets turned around and heavily waved its sword, hitting the man's body. The Black Iron Man's broken arm was made of the purest black iron. Under this sword, it was broken in half. With a squeak, blood came out of his neck. Blood covered the ground in an instant. The feminine man on Xiaonyo's side raised the mourning treasure in his hand, intending to draw out Xiaonyo's soul. His Xian power was originally to attack the soul. Even when his heart was dug out by the puppets, his face was still the same expression. Why? He landed heavily on the ground and spat out a mouthful of blood. As for Gugij, he was even more violent. After shouting, the 18 golden puppets came in front of them and raised their hands at the same time. The mysterious sword fell on the opponent's body. The people of the Alliance of Torturers were no match for Gugij. With the help of the 18 golden puppets, the brothers Dinyo and Xiaonyo, and some people who were originally in the village, the situation was quickly reversed. Ji led the people around her to the original place. They looked coldly at the bearded leader in front of them. The bearded leader was still in the earth wall and didn't know what to do. Ji waved her hand. A huge whirlpool seemed to appear underground. The bearded leader fell into the whirlpool bit by bit. Soon, sand covered his face, his head, and directly sent him to the depths of hell. We won. As the old man shouted, everyone in the village followed suit. The spies outside the village also brought the news back to their masters. Almost all of the factions had the same thought. If they wanted to regain control of the village, they would have to sacrifice a lot. But in Hell's Valley, human lives were worthless, but human lives were valuable. If they didn't have enough people, they would only face death or be swallowed up. No faction was willing to accept such an outcome. Without this Lord's order, don't go near the Alliance of Protectors. All the leaders ordered at the same time. That night, a huge banquet was held. Ji restrained her Xian power and didn't fight, so she got drunk. Chapter 683. The next day, Ji rode on the Xian beast that she had seized from the bearded leader and arrived at the arena without stopping to rest. Huang Jinjian had 2 people standing beside him. He walked up and said, "I'm looking forward to the day we fight." After he left, the 2 people who had been following him stepped forward and looked at Ji with a smile on their faces. "Today, let the 2 of us be your opponents." Their gazes were like venomous snakes staring at Ji. Ji walked away without looking back. When the 2 of them saw Ji's condescending appearance, they were immediately infuriated. "Brat, how dare you ignore us like this? We are Huang Jinjian's disciples." The 2 of them gnashed their teeth as they shouted. However, Ji didn't care. According to Ji's rules, he had to teach Huang Jinjian's disciple a lesson. It was accompanied by the shouts of the commentator. The atmosphere in the arena was ignited. One of the 2 kings of the arena, Huang Jinjian's disciple, was going to fight Ji. This was big news. A few of them rushed to tell each other. They were looking forward to this duel. As expected of Huang Jinjian's disciple, he didn't enter the arena by strolling on the stage. Instead, he chose to enter with a flying sword. Once again, the crowd cheered. The 2 of them were very proud. "Let's see how Ji compares to us." Many people in the audience still had to kill each other for their own points. Although there hadn't been any newcomers for 1,000 years, there were still many people in Hell's Valley. It was unknown who would be able to escape. Who would have the time to watch people kill each other? Ji only had 3 matches. Most of the people who watched Ji's matches were already dead, so this batch of people was a new audience. Ji appeared on the battle ring, and everyone's vigilant eyes locked onto him. Where did this brat come from? They couldn't help but think in their hearts. However, to be able to defeat the giant beastman. He could be considered an expert. Without further ado, everyone was waiting for the duel to start. However, this Ji-Yu's way of entering the arena was really hard to support. He just walked up without any aura of an expert, so he couldn't be that strong. Where there were people, there would be places to bet. Almost no one was willing to bet their points on Ji-Yu. When Ji-Yu heard this, he was as happy as a child. What was this? He was just about to doze off. Someone obediently handed him a pillow. This was simply a joyous occasion, so he put down 80 treasures. Profound stones were not very useful in the arena, but treasures such as wine, treasures, dan beads, and profound grasses, even if they lost to you in exchange, it was not impossible. Of course, you couldn't be killed by the other party. The duel officially begins. The commentator yelled. Huang Jinjian's two disciples gave themselves good names, Big Sword and Small Sword. The two of them were experts. After hearing the commentator's words, the two of them waved their hands at the same time. The swords that were originally inserted into the ground suddenly flew in the direction of Ji-Yu. The swords contained a power that could destroy everything in the world. The treasures fell heavily on Ji-Yu's body, but his aura shield blocked them in an instant. Good. The moment the duel started, Big Sword and Small Sword used their profound skills. It seems like they don't intend to leave Ji-Yu any way out. The commentator said excitedly. As the disciple of the Duel King, it's really frightening. Ji-Yu smiled. This level of attack, he didn't know how Huang Jinjian trained his disciples. He waved his hand. A huge amount of profound energy flew past Ji-Yu's chi aura. It was like a gust of wind that blew away the two swords that had been infused with a huge amount of profound energy. The two of them did not expect Ji-Yu to be able to break through their moves in one move. Originally, the two of them thought that only their master could do this. I wonder how the Big Sword and Small Sword will deal with this. The two of them looked at each other and immediately formed sword fingers with their hands. When the profound energy collided with each other, it started to intertwine and connect with each other. It was like a tsunami rushing over. The two of them immediately dodged, but the air was already filled with murderous sword energy. Ji wasn't in a hurry. He just waved the Kuan Peng giant sword. The giant Kuan Peng broke away from the giant sword. The Kuan Peng was the overlord of the sky. It bared its fangs, and when the sword energy came in front of it, it just opened its mouth and swallowed it. It looked at the two of them with dissatisfaction, as if it was very disdainful. The Big Sword and Small Sword seemed to fly forward and arrived in front of them. After the giant sword landed heavily on the ground, Yi Zichen was stunned. Then a loud boom was heard. The Kuan Peng giant sword had already swallowed a sword energy, but its expression seemed to be very unhappy. It hoped that the Big Sword and Small Sword would obediently hand over the rest of the sword energy. The sword energy was swallowed by the opponent, and he seems to be dissatisfied. This may be the biggest humiliation of a swordsman. I wonder how the two of them will deal with it next. Ji looked at the Kuan Peng giant sword in front of him, and there was a trace of disdain in the corner of his mouth. Let's see how you will deal with it. The Big Sword and Small Sword seemed to be crazy as they kept releasing their sword energy. Unfortunately, things didn't go as they wished. The sword energy was completely absorbed by the Kuan Peng giant sword without hesitation. Ji looked at the two of them in front of him and said indifferently, "Surrender. You are his disciples. I can let you two go." But when these words came out, the two of them felt that they were greatly insulted. Didn't you know how to swallow the sword energy? Then you can't swallow the real sword, right? With such thoughts, they rushed in front of Ji, raised their hands, and slapped in front of Ji. Ji also raised his hands at the same time, blocking the two precious weapons in front of him. If this is all you have, you can leave now. Humiliation. It was another great humiliation. The two of them attacked again. A trace of killing intent appeared in Ji eyes, and he swung his sword down heavily. The two of them knew that they couldn't dodge it no matter what. A ray of light fell on the ground. It isolated the people in front of him. A precious weapon made of golden black iron was inserted into the ground, but Ji didn't stop and directly came in front of them. Huang Jinjian had no choice but to call back his precious weapon. If he was a little later, his two disciples would have to meet the king of hell. Jiyu didn't panic. He just pulled his sword back and clashed with his sword. He stood in front of Jiyu, and the two of them looked at each other. Jiyu said indifferently, "How about today's battle?" The commentator said with a smile, "Of course, the two of them lost." Jiyu locked his eyes on the commentator. "What do you think?" Huang Jinjian said indifferently, "You won." After Jiyu left, the two of them wanted to support their master, but they didn't expect that their master's hands were trembling at this moment, as if they were about to break in the next moment. "This person is really scary. Don't provoke him anymore." Jiyu returned to his village. Suddenly, someone ran over and said that the immortal grass couldn't be raised. Jiyu went forward to check and immediately laughed. It turned out that this was a fertile land in Hell's Valley. Jiyu told them about his knowledge of farmers before he transmigrated. Everyone buried the corpses of the Xian beasts that died a few days ago. Sure enough, the ground became fertile again. Everyone's eyebrows were unexpectedly raised in joy. Jiyu smiled faintly. These people were all unwilling to commit crimes with a union of 10,000 immortals, and they were worth cherishing. They returned home and were preparing to sleep when suddenly a group of people appeared at the village gate. "Where's your leader?" "We, Liang Xuanzhua, invite him." Jiyu asked indifferently. "Who are you waiting for?" "We are also people who love the land and the cultivation of Xian cultivators, so our leader is looking forward to forming an alliance with him." Jiyu nodded. Gugu said that he wanted to protect Jiyu so that she wouldn't be deceived by these people with bad intentions. Jiyu laughed. She only taught his granddaughter to say a few witty words. She didn't expect that he would learn it so quickly. She spurred her horse and went in the other direction. Jiyu galloped on the main road. The people beside her quickly caught up with her. With great difficulty, they finally caught up and brought Jiyu to the front of the crowd. A huge hole appeared in front of Jiyu. When she went in, she saw that she was surrounded by young girls. Jiyu was a little surprised. "Why is this?" The two people beside her replied embarrassedly, "In our clan, women automatically get pregnant, so we are all women. It is also because of this that others have taken a fancy to us." Jiyu immediately understood. It was impossible to break through Xian cultivation in 1,000 years here. Then the test of life and death appeared in front of these people. They didn't just have offspring. In Hell's Valley, offspring represented the fate of being killed or turned into a murderous maniac. Even if they couldn't bear to see this scene, it didn't mean that their desires would disappear. So these women became objects for them to vent their desires. Every once in a while, a young girl would be captured. Tomorrow was the day when the Slayers' Alliance would come to collect rent. Although it was called rent, it was clearly a kidnapping. Great leader Liang walked valiantly in front of Jiyu and said generously, "Sir, please take a seat. This humble one is Liang Jing. Greetings to Sir." Although she was called Jing, she didn't look like someone who could calm down. Jiyu reported her name and sat down. Chapter 684. Great leader Liang still had a forthright expression on his face. Unknowingly, he had voiced out his wish. No matter what Jiyu decided, he would protect his people firmly. They looked at each other. Their gazes were fixed on Jiyu. Jiyu said calmly, "Haha, great leader Liang is right. Why don't we hang together? Let's go forward." After hearing Jiyu's words, great leader Liang became excited. It was great to be able to ally with Jiyu. The corners of their mouths were full of smiles. Great leader Liang immediately called everyone over and beat the big drum in front of him. Boom, boom. At this moment, the sound of 3 drums began to vibrate. They all took a step forward. However, a gust of wind suddenly appeared in the sky. After both of their hands were cut open, the blood dripped onto the big bowl. The big bowl emitted a mysterious light. At this moment, the light suddenly brightened up. At this moment, the two forces joined together. The two forces could be considered to have formed an alliance. Great leader Liang stood on the stage and raised his wine glass generously. He said heroically, "Everyone, from today onwards, We will not be bullied by others. Long live, long live. Below the stage, everyone was cheering loudly. They were excited that they had chosen such a famous lord. They waved their hands continuously. At the same time, they were shouting loudly. Along with the sound of the bugle horn, they slowly stepped out and ran forward. They saw a group of people from the Slaughter Alliance chasing after a caravan. The rest of the people wanted to get up and take a look. After all, the two sides had just formed an alliance. It was time to test them. Ji did not say anything. She just rushed out with the two people behind her. When the members of the Killer Alliance saw Ji, they smiled faintly. That's the kid who killed the people from the Slaughter Alliance. Catch him and hang his head on the pillar outside. Ji landed on the ground. The two people in front of her took out their treasured weapons and charged toward Ji. Ji disappeared on the spot. After a while, they charged toward Ji. They flew up and charged toward Ji. Their eyes locked on Ji. They disappeared in an instant. He waved the long sword in his hand and charged forward. He turned around and swung his sword heavily in Ji's direction. In the next second, he abruptly turned around and looked in front of him. He said indifferently, "Go to hell." After shouting this sentence, Ji suddenly turned around. He turned around and placed the long sword in his hand on the ground. Along with the fall of the heavy sword, the two Xian energies collided heavily. Ji suddenly flew up. However, at this moment, the two people flew back. Ji snorted coldly and released the dark force in his hand to the maximum. Ding! The host used Raging Flames and gained 1 by 999 experience points. At this moment, 2 balls of flames flew into the sky and fell, burning their bodies. The two people let out a scream. In the past, when they chased these people from the Survivors Alliance, they could only huddle up in their own small village. If it wasn't for the existence of the young lady from the Liang family, their village would have been finished. After shouting these 2 words, the two people looked at each other and directly came in front of Ji. Ji directly burned the 2 balls of flames on their bodies. They were swallowed by the flames, and in the end, only their bones were left. At this moment, Ji put away his precious weapon. He turned around and said indifferently, "As your ally, I feel that you can't stay in this place any longer." However, this place had already been targeted. It was impossible for Ji to turn around every time to save them. The two people looked at each other. Great leader Liang walked out and said indifferently, "In that case, everyone will rest for a night. Tomorrow, we will follow Brother Ji back." With the addition of this group of people, even if Ji did not force them, in time, the alliance of protectors would multiply and develop sufficiently. All he needed to do was to raise their strength. At this thought, Ji stood up, turned around, and walked in the other direction. He said indifferently, "Ji, how dare you?" The leader of the Killers Alliance clenched his fists. There was a trace of killing intent in his eyes. They rarely paid attention to the matters of the duel arena, but he felt that Ji must be related to the duel arena in some way. Thinking of this, he opened his mouth and said, "Immediately investigate where this person came from." The two people knelt on the ground and said indifferently, "Yes." After shouting this sentence, the two people left. After investigating for a while, they came back and knelt in front of their leader. Reporting to the leader, Ji is a newcomer. We haven't had a newcomer for thousands of years, so that person values him very much. He wants to see how far he can go in the duel arena. That old man should have died a long time ago. Even if I touch his people, what could he do? Send out 80 people to eradicate that village. After shouting these words, the two of them knelt on the ground, turned around, and slowly retreated. Ji was still sleeping. Suddenly, he felt that there was a kitten around his leg. He opened his eyes wide and saw Leader Liang massaging his legs. "You're awake." "Leader Liang, what do you mean by this?" She sat in front of Ji and said, "I don't know how strong you are, but there is no doubt that you are very strong. You are stronger than all of them combined. If I can serve you, it will be enough." "Damn it, where's the outspoken heroine of the day? Give me back my heroine." At this moment, Ji stood up and said indifferently, "You don't have to do this. I'm not that kind of person." Seeing Ji Yu appraising him, Leader Liang's face turned red. He didn't know what to say. He turned his head and said indifferently, "We are allies. Of course, we will rise or fall together. There is no need to panic." After saying this, Ji Yu turned around and walked in another direction. Great Leader Liang smiled helplessly. He had never thought that in the past, it was always others who pursued him. Why did Ji Yu not even look at him when he took the initiative to deliver himself to her? If this were to spread, how could he face others? However, since there was no daylight in this world, he could only rely on his own heart to turn around and walk in another direction. They looked up and saw that there was still a black veil above them. They sighed, pulled their horses, and walked straight out. Ji Yu started to plan. He planned to settle these people down and return to the duel arena. He and Huang Jinjian would have to fight in the end. But to his surprise, when he arrived at the entrance of the village, he saw that the village was surrounded. They looked up, and directly in front of them, they saw that the people in front of them were surrounding Ji Yu. It seemed that they didn't bleed enough last time. It wasn't enough to make them afraid. He looked around and saw that several people from different factions were standing in the distance. They were waiting to see what would happen later. Ji Yu smiled faintly. "This is simply too stupid," he said indifferently. "Today, I will kill you once and for all." A few people burst out laughing. "Ji Yu, aren't you being a little too presumptuous? Do you know who we are? Kill." After saying this, they looked at each other and said slowly, "Brothers from afar, can you help us?" They rushed forward and looked at the people in front of them. They said indifferently, "Kill Ji Yu and take back our things." As they shouted, they all arrived before Ji Yu and fixed their gazes on him. Just at that moment, the profound crossbows exploded. Countless arrows flew out and landed on the bodies of the people in front of them. One after another, they fell into a pool of blood. The blood on their bodies was incomparably thick. Who would have thought that the profound realm experts would actually die under the profound crossbows? However, these Xian crossbows were 7th grade weapons specially made by Ji Yu. It was easy for them to fight a peak LV1 human profound realm expert. However, Ji Yu had already handed these crossbows to the villagers. Dainyu, Xiaonyo, Gugu, and the others looked in front of them and fell silent. They didn't know what would happen in the future, but they knew that Ji Yu had given them the chance to survive. At this time, if they still didn't know how to be flexible and how to survive, they would be too stupid. Therefore, these crossbows were all shot out. After blocking the crossbow bolts, the remaining forces finally came to their senses. This group of people was no longer a group of sheep. Chapter 685. The members of the Killer's Alliance looked in front of them in fear. There was a trace of fear in their eyes. Those people just now were all lying in a pool of blood. They looked at each other and walked towards Ji Yu. They summoned their treasured weapons and held them in their hands. Then, another round of arrows was released. However, it was clear that the survivors were no longer afraid of the crossbows. They looked in Ji Yu's direction with disdain on their faces. One of them urged his horse forward and said faintly, "I know you are very powerful, but so what? We know where your weakness lies." After shouting this, he waved his hand. Suddenly, 40 to 50 people came out from the side and held all the men, women, and children in front of Ji Yu. "Leader, we've already captured all of those people and brought them here." The leader of the Killer's Alliance looked in Ji Yu's direction and said lightly, "Haha, boy, so what if you are powerful? I'm now holding a sword. As long as I give the order, they will all go to hell. If you dare to move, they will immediately die under the sword." After shouting this sentence, Ji Yu said lightly, "Is that so? You know what I hate most in this life is when people threaten me." He waved his hand slightly, and a dozen people beside him stepped forward. They put their long swords on Ji Yu's neck. In the blink of an eye, Ji Yu's hand flashed with a dark light. Ding! The host used the 18 golden puppets. The reward is 1 times 999 experience points. Ding! Congratulations to the host. The 18 golden puppets have broken through to the small success level. Ding! Congratulations to the host. The 18 golden puppets have evolved into the 18 golden arhats. You could feel that the 18 golden-bodied arhats on his body seemed to draw out a trace of mental power in an instant and poured it into his body. After receiving this powerful mental strength, he slowly stood up. The 18 golden arhats arrived in front of everyone in an instant. With the help of GU's dark forest, they flew in front of the villagers and waited for them to land on the ground before taking out a treasure. These treasures were all superior grade 7 treasures forged by GU. It was incomparably sharp. In the next moment, they raised their hands and swung it out heavily. The two profound energies collided with each other, producing a kacha sound. The treasures in the hands of the Killer Alliance fell to the ground one after another. They had never expected that the treasures in GU's hands would be so powerful. A single slash was all it took to break their treasured weapons. At this time, they looked at each other and turned around. At this time, the dark forest once again appeared in the void. The 18 golden puppets led the villagers in front of them into the dark forest. They led the villagers and landed behind GU. The 18 golden arhats knelt down in front of GU one after another and said solemnly, "Greetings, young Master GU. Thank you for bestowing us with spiritual wisdom. From today onwards, we will follow you, young Master, regardless of life or death." After saying this, they looked at each other and stood up. The group of people rushed forward and attacked in the direction of GU. In the next moment, GU held the treasure in his hand and appeared in front of the crowd in a flash. He raised the treasure in his hand and directly slashed in the direction of GU. The giant Kuan Peng sword in GU's hand suddenly appeared in the next moment. A Kuan Peng soul flew out. At this moment, the Kuan Peng soul opened its bloody mouth and took a deep breath. It seemed to have the intent to swallow the sky. It radiated and absorbed the people in front of it. Those people were swallowed into its stomach. A few people who rushed forward fell into the Kuan Peng's stomach in the blink of an eye. The leader of the Killer Alliance, who had witnessed all this, was infuriated and covered his body in an instant. Mystical skill, layers of stone mountain. It was actually an Earth rank mystical skill. The surrounding sand quickly gathered together, forming large boulders. Those huge stones fell in the direction of GU like a meteor shower. GU picked up the giant Kuan Peng sword beside him and waved it in the next moment. He waved it in the direction of those stones. The 18 golden arhats did not wait for long. They jumped out one by one in an instant and slowly brought those treasures in front of GU. GU turned around and floated in the air. The dark force in his hand heavily waved the sword in front of him. The huge sword chi made a loud sound and smashed the huge stones in front of him. Those fragments fell to the ground. "Ha ha, you've been fooled, boy." After shouting out those words, those fragments actually turned into star-like light. You don't know, right? This profound skill of mine can borrow the power of the stars to transform into a formation. Within this formation of mine, no matter who it is, they will not be able to escape. Furthermore, they will suffer heavy injuries. As long as you enter, you will quickly turn into a pool of blood. GU ignored his words. He just closed his eyes and felt the movement of the array beside him. The 18 golden puppets and the villagers stood firmly in front of GU. Their gazes were vigilant as they scanned their surroundings, regardless of how the array would change later. They made up their minds to protect GU even if they had to sacrifice themselves. Their gazes began to search the surroundings, as if they would kill any unrelated person who appeared later. Suddenly, a scream was heard. He looked around, and when he saw that they had left, he turned his head and looked out. He saw that his eyes were locked on the people in the distance. He said faintly, "What happened?" Huang Laojian. Huang Laojian has turned into a pool of blood. He shouted this sentence nervously and looked around. GU said lightly, "Let me take a look." It turned out that in this array, the blood in the stars was gradually being pulled out bit by bit. He took a deep breath and disappeared in the blink of an eye. He slowly took a step forward. At this moment, the blood on third Uncle Nyo's body was being pulled out bit by bit. After Ji sealed his acupoints, he observed carefully. The blood was still being pulled out. He raised his head. He couldn't see any stars. Where did the power of the stars come from? Ji was puzzled. Right at this moment, because he was too close to third Uncle Neo, the blood on his body was being pulled out crazily. He used his spiritual power to suppress it. He used his mental power to expel the dark force. It turned out that it was the art of blood. No wonder it could pull out the blood on others. However, it must have the dark force on his body as a primer. Thinking of this, Ji opened his eyes. At this moment, he slowly took a step forward. In an instant, he disappeared on the spot. He took out his precious weapon and swung it heavily. A terrifying dark force flew out from the artifact in Ji's hand and collided with the earthen array. The earthen array shook slightly. Ha ha ha, what a fool. Do you think my array can be broken so easily by you? He laughed out loud. At that moment, Ji disappeared in a flash. In the next moment, he appeared in front of the crowd. He raised his head and waved the bejeweled weapon in his hand. It was accompanied by a loud noise. At this moment, the mountain of earth and rocks slowly collapsed, and the rocks fell to the ground. The corners of Ji's mouth curled into a smile as he said indifferently, "This is how I'm going to break your mystical skill." After he finished speaking, Yi Zichen nodded. Shock was written all over the slaughterer leader's face. "Just now, when I checked, I found your dark force in their bodies. So, I deliberately waved my dark force and merged it with the stone mountain. This is how I broke your array." He stretched out his hand and waved it around. At this moment, the soil and rocks flew up, and Ji's lips curled into a smile. "Now, I'll return the array to you." After shouting this sentence, the stone flew in front of the leader of the Killer Alliance. He looked out and did not expect that he would fall into his own array. The members of the Killer's Alliance let out miserable shrieks one after another. The blood on their bodies was sucked out in an instant. Only the leader was able to hold on for a while. They could sense that Ji's spiritual power had reached such a terrifying level. They locked their eyes on Ji. With a flash, Ji disappeared from where he stood. She came in front of the leader of the Killer Alliance and held his neck. Now he had to resist Ji's blood array with all his strength. He spat out a mouthful of blood. "Fight," he thought. Suddenly, he raised his head and picked up the Kuan Peng sword in Ji's hand. He held the sword hilt and charged towards Ji. The two of them exchanged hundreds of blows in the air. It was too terrifying. The leader of the Killer Alliance was only left with fear. Each of Ji's moves was more ferocious than the previous one. As each move overlapped, not only did Ji's strength not weaken, it seemed that his cultivation of the mysterious art had improved even more. "Ji, you forced me to do this." Chapter 686. The leader of the Killer Alliance looked at Ji in disbelief. Ji said calmly, "Boy, you've got guts." After shouting this, Ji disappeared on the spot. In front of everyone, he turned around and swung his sword heavily. A huge explosion was heard. Blood flowed from the corner of the mouth of the leader of the Killer Alliance, and a huge red mark appeared on his body. "Very good." After saying this, he rushed in the direction of Ji. Ji jumped up and grasped the Kuan Peng giant sword in his hand. Their weapons collided. A mouthful of blood flowed from their mouths, and they instantly fell into a pool of blood. The corners of Ji's mouth curled into a smile. He waved his hand, and after shouting these words, they turned around and gradually walked in another direction step by step. The villagers came out one after another. Seeing the head of the leader of the Killer Alliance being chopped off by Ji, they all looked envious. Their faces were filled with envy and madness. Everyone was holding all kinds of things and placing them on the ground. They kept shouting, "Long live, long live, long live." When Ji saw the people of other forces coming up with smiles on their faces, he knew that from today on, the villagers would not be threatened anymore. Thinking of this, he turned his head and slowly walked in another direction. The duel arena was particularly crowded today. Many masters came because today was the battle between Ji, Huang Jinjian, and Tian Xiao. The sound of a whistle was heard. The commentators shouted, Begin. Huang Jingjian crossed his arms in front of his chest and looked in the direction of Ji. The woman beside him also stood in the same place and did not move. The three of them stood in a corner. At this moment, a voice slowly spread over. Huang Jingjian had been ambushed by Ji the last time and had been struck between his thumb and forefinger. It had taken him a few days to recover. Thinking of this, he turned around. He waved his two sword fingers in the direction of Ji. Suddenly, the golden sword behind him flew out and floated in the air, making two circles in the air. It split into two and flew in the direction of Ji and Tian Xiao. Ji turned around and spun in the air. At this time, the golden sword kept stabbing in the direction of Ji. Ji looked in the direction of Tian Fong. He saw that Tian Fong kept moving up and down in front of the golden sword, as if she was a god, dancing gracefully. Even a profound skill could have such graceful movements. This was something that Ji had never expected. He took 2 steps forward, and the Kuan Peng giant sword appeared in his hand. He swung it heavily. Ding! The host swung the Kuan Peng giant sword and gained 1 by 999 experience points. The Kuan Peng's soul flew in front of everyone as if it wanted to eat a little bug. It flew down and opened its bloody mouth. Who knew that Huang Jingjian would go through the Kuan Peng's weapon spirit? He disappeared on the spot. After a while, he slowly took a step forward. Ji said calmly, Huang Jingjian is really good. You're not bad either. Brothers, do you have to fight to the death with this little girl? Huang Jingjian said disdainfully, If we don't move forward, I'm afraid you won't let us go, right? After hearing this, Tian Xiao's mouth revealed a trace of a smile. Brother, what are you thinking? I'm a good person. After shouting this, he flew in front of Ji. Compared to a threat like Tian Xiao, Ji, who was in front of him, was the greatest threat. After sensing this, Ji suddenly turned around and picked up the Kuan Peng giant sword in front of her. She grabbed the sword hilt and attacked the opponent. Huang Jingjian held his own weapon and collided heavily with Ji's weapon. A smile appeared on his face. Boy, you're still too young, but your talent is not bad. If you cultivate here for a while, maybe this old man can't compare to you. After he finished speaking, he spat out a mouthful of blood and fell heavily to the ground. Huang Jingjian's face was full of disbelief. How is this possible? How is this possible? How can you break my move? Ji smiled faintly and did not react. He just disappeared from where he was and slowly walked forward to stand in front of Tian Xiao. Tian Xiao felt goosebumps all over her body. There was a trace of fear in her eyes. The strength displayed by Ji was too terrifying. He held the Kuan Peng giant sword and said flatly, Destiny, old man, you're the key to leaving this place, right? Hearing that they could leave, everyone stared at old man Tian Ming in surprise. Old man Tian Ming laughed. I didn't expect you to see through it so quickly. My immortal spring water isn't finished yet. Everyone glanced at each other. Destiny old man said that he wasn't water from a pond. So what was he? In their hearts, they didn't know what the immortal spring water was. He walked forward and opened his hands. After he raised his hands, the Xian energy in the heaven and earth danced. A white light emerged from their bodies. The white light all turned to the bottom of the stage. Ji frowned and raised her fist. At this moment, she raised her hand and punched the ground. A cracking sound came from the ground. It was as if the ground was falling down. A sea of blood appeared in front of everyone. It turned out that what they had been drinking wasn't the immortal spring water, but the ardent blood water. This water could transform a Xian cultivator's cultivation into vitality. That was why they seemed to be able to live for so long. Of course, there were some people who didn't have this water, so they didn't feel anything strange. Ji slowly took a step forward and locked her eyes on her opponent. Destiny old man had already added something to the water. As long as he activated the formation, it would absorb all the blood in their bodies. Ji turned her head and said indifferently, Kill. In the blink of an eye, old man Destiny flew in front of Ji and grabbed Huang Jingjian. After all, Huang Jinjian had drunk quite a bit of this spring water. Although he lost today, he didn't think that he was a slave to others. He lifted Shou Only. Suddenly, in the next second, Shou Only was stunned. Jiyu pulled him behind her and waved Huang Jinjian's fingers. At this moment, all the swords were sent flying. A rain of swords fell from the sky. Clanging sounds rang out continuously. Destiny Old Man laughed. Huang Jinjian's treasured weapon didn't have any effect. He turned around and sent out a heavy slap. Along with the sound of an explosion, he flew up. Destiny Elder took 2 steps forward. The earth energy on his body flew out and covered his body. As the earth energy continued to reverberate, he grabbed Huang Jinjian's neck. "You should be my sacrifice. Otherwise, why would I keep the 3 of you alive? Originally, I thought that there would be a winner and a loser between the 2 of you today." "Ha ha!" He laughed loudly. At this moment, Huang Jinjian slowly fell into the sea of fire. At this moment, the sea of blood covered their bodies. Huang Jinjian, a cold swordsman, directly stretched out his hand at this moment, as if he was shouting for help. Jiyu disappeared. After a while, Jiyu gradually took 2 steps forward. At this time, the rest of the people came forward in Jiyu's direction. Jiyu said indifferently, "Tian Xiao run." After receiving Jiyu's reminder, Tian Xiao reacted. Just as he was about to run back, he didn't expect that there would be lightning in the sky at this moment. The power of lightning was accumulating in the sky. The power of lightning instantly fell down. Jiyu flew forward and caught the person in front of him. Tian Xiao had always been hurting others, but he didn't expect to be at a disadvantage today. Now, he was being chased by his master. As he thought of this, he disappeared from where he was in an instant. Jiyu reached out and grabbed Tian Xiao, pulling her behind him. The corners of his mouth curved into a smile. He slowly took 2 steps forward. In the next moment, Jiyu's Kuan Peng giant sword was already slashing in Destiny Old Man's direction. Destiny Old Man's earth energy covered his body in an instant. He turned around and took 2 steps forward. The Kuan Peng giant sword slashed down, and the 2 weapons collided. Destiny Old Man used a crutch-like weapon. He turned around and disappeared in an instant. He disappeared in an instant and took 2 steps forward. "Boy, you have some ability. Hand over Tian Xiao, and this old man can accommodate you under this old man." After saying this, he opened his mouth and said, "Kill." Destiny Old Man snorted coldly. "You don't know how to adapt to the situation." Chapter 687. Tianming Old Man flew in front of Jiyu. His eyes were filled with disdain as he charged towards Jiyu. He exchanged glances with each other. The spring water kept reverberating, and the blood water danced in the air like a spring. It was as if evil dragons were flying out. When they arrived in front of Jiyu, the blood dragons coiled around the bodies of those people, and the blood in their bodies was sucked dry one after another. Tianming Old Man watched as the blood gathered in front of him. The corners of his mouth curled up into a smile. He took 2 steps forward, and the Xian energy in his hand continued to gather together. The blood was poured into his palm, and he waved his palm heavily. The blood dragons roared and rushed in front of one of the people. In the next moment, the spectators were sucked dry. Jiyu and Tianming Old Man glanced at each other. They had never expected that Tianming Old Man would want to kill the spectators instead of them. Originally, I planned to use this move when the 7 stars gathered. I didn't expect that an ignorant child like you would ruin my plan. Tianming Old Man sneered and appeared in front of Jiyu in the blink of an eye. He dodged Jiyu's figure. He reached forward with his withered claws, wanting to grab the person in front of him. At this moment, the silk handkerchief in her hand flew out. In an instant, the silk handkerchief flew out and wrapped around his withered arm. With a cold snort, the 2 silk handkerchiefs suddenly broke into pieces. Jiyu appeared in front of the crowd in a flash. He said faintly, "Let go of your hand. You like this girl?" Tianming Old Man smiled. Jiyu ignored his words and took a step forward. In the next moment, countless fine sand flew out from under Jiyu's feet. Ding! Host used the Earth Roaming Dragon. Obtained 1 by 999 experience points. Strictly speaking, the Earth Roaming Dragon was more powerful than the Earth Prison. Tianming Old Man's hands and feet were entangled by the Earth Roaming Dragon. At this moment, the sand started to sink down. After seeing the sand, Jiyu's Kuan Peng sword appeared in his hand. He picked it up and flew out. Ding! Host used the Raging Fire. Obtained 1 by 999 experience points. The Raging Fire instantly infected the bodies of those people. As the fire burned, the crowd screamed and locked their eyes on Jiyu. Tianming Old Man, who was supposed to be used as a sacrifice to the Blood Sea, had been burned clean by Jiyu's Raging Fire. A trace of anger appeared in his eyes. "How dare you, brat? You're so rampant." After shouting this, he flew forward and came in front of Jiyu. He raised the Kuan Peng sword in his hand and directly attacked Jiyu. Tianming Old Man stepped on the 7 stars and merged his Xian Qi into the ground in an instant. In an instant, countless streams of blood spurted out from the ground and directly hit Jiyu. However, Jiyu's Raging Fire cloak directly absorbed the flames into his body. Jiyu took a step forward. He directly covered his body with the Raging Fire cloak. Tianming Old Man looked at him in confusion and asked, "Brat, you actually have a weapon spirit in your body." When he saw Jiyu use the Kuan Peng sword, he felt a trace of fear in his heart. He sensed that Jiyu's weapon spirit was very strong. There was a powerful artifact spirit within the artifact. But that wasn't the end of it. He looked up and saw that even Jiyu's clothes had an artifact spirit. This kid was a treasure from head to toe. If he killed him, he would use his flesh and blood to create his own fountain of youth. After shouting these words, his body flashed and disappeared from the spot. He took 2 steps forward and said faintly, "Kid, just you wait." He flew in front of Jiyu and reached out to grab Jiyu's Gangqi. The Gangqi suddenly exploded and Jiyu took 2 steps forward. Jiyu disappeared in the blink of an eye. He turned around and swung down the Kuan Peng giant sword in his hand. The corner of Tianming Old Man's mouth curled up into a smile. "Kid, you think you can break through my Gangqi?" Jiyu pulled the precious weapon in front of her and suddenly turned her body around. She swung the precious weapon heavily, and the 2 weapons collided at this moment. However, to Tianming Old Man's surprise, the Kuan Peng sword in Jiyu's hand flew out a weapon spirit. It directly pounced on his body and swallowed his soul. After letting out a scream, Tianming Old Man fell to the ground softly. Jiyu kept waving the Kuan Peng sword in his hand. Both of Tianming Old Man's arms were broken and fell to the ground. Old Man Tianming looked fearfully in Jiyu's direction. Jiyu picked up the Kuan Peng sword in front of him and twisted his body quickly. The weapon opened a huge hole in Tianming Old Man's body. After Tianming Old Man died, Jiyu obtained all his points. Several people in the duel arena lowered their heads with fear in their eyes. They raised their hands. Jiyu said faintly, "Give me the flying locust stone and those things." The owner of this place had died at the hands of Jiyu. The staff of the duel arena did not dare to disobey. They could only involuntarily swallow a mouthful of saliva. They took out a flying locust stone and handed it to Jiyu. After getting the flying locust stone, Jiyu planned to get up and leave. Although Tianming Old Man was dead, the taboo of the union of 10,000 immortals still existed. Jiyu did not think it was a good thing to let these people go. He gave a heaven-ranked Xian skill to Leader Liang. Seeing that Jiyu was leaving, Leader Liang was a little reluctant. "You will come back. Maybe we will meet again in the future," Jiyu said heavily. Tian Xiao stood in the distance and watched them walk into the taboo. A smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Jiyu flew into the circle. With a thought, he connected with the array of the Gold City sect and disappeared in the blink of an eye. A moment later, he disappeared from the spot. He appeared in the same place with a smile on his face. The 2 Xian Qi outlined together, and a small circle of light appeared on the ground. Jiyu returned to the Gold City sect, but he never expected that Tian Xiu would follow closely behind Jiyu. With a flash of his body, he disappeared from the spot. A moment later, Tian Xiu also slowly floated down. She waved the silk handkerchief in her hand and disappeared in the blink of an eye, running down the mountain. Jiyu sensed Tian Xiu's appearance. The corners of his mouth curled into a smile. He never expected that someone would be able to follow him out. However, it was just a little Tian Xiu, so he let her be. Jiyu came out in the blink of an eye. They raised their heads, and there was a smile in their eyes. When the elders saw that their sect leader was able to walk out of the Demon Valley so safely, a smile appeared at the corner of their mouth. He said lightly, "We congratulate sect leader for being able to come out of Hell Valley safe and sound." After shouting these words, they fixed their eyes on Jiyu. Jiyu took 2 steps forward and said lightly, "I've already obtained the holy treasure. I don't know if it's still here." The rest of the elders came forward, cupped their hands, and placed plates of things on the table. There were countless heavenly treasures on the plates. Jiyu's eyes lit up. He took 2 steps forward and took the thing in front of him. Jiyu raised his hands and moved them forward. The pagoda gradually took shape. It was built using the help of Jin City's workers. Jin City had sent people to build the pagoda. At this moment, they poured all the Xian Qi into the pagoda. Now that the pagoda had not taken any effect, they fixed their eyes on the pagoda in front of them. He poured the Xian Qi into the pagoda. Accompanied by a burst of Xian Qi, the pagoda emitted a halo of light. Jiyu slowly stepped out. At this moment, Jiyu turned around and took out a treasure. Jiyu picked up the treasure in his hand, and 2 pieces flew out. He poured all the Xian Qi into the pagoda. At this moment, the flying locust stone and the rest of the heavenly treasures flew into the pagoda. It was as if they were connected. Not long after, a ray of light appeared in the pagoda. They all flew into the pagoda. Seeing this scene, he kept turning his head back. A smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. After shouting the word "rise," the pagoda slowly took shape. The people in front of him stood up. Jiyu walked in and entered the pagoda. Then, the pagoda was filled with treasures. After he walked in, he raised his head. The rest of the people walked into the pagoda. It was a very good spiritual energy. I can sense a lot of Xian Qi here. Chapter 688. All the disciples of the Jinsheng sect were shocked by the pagoda that pierced the sky. They slowly approached the pagoda with a look of surprise in their eyes. What was going on? How could it be so powerful? What they saw inside the pagoda was a pagoda that was emitting a holy light. Jiyu looked down from above and said slowly to the crowd below, "Now that the cultivation pagoda has been completed, the Jinsheng sect will share it with all the inner and outer disciples." The moment they heard Jiyu's words, everyone cried out in surprise. "Sect leader is mighty! Sect leader is mighty!" It was unknown who was the first to shout, but the rest of the people entered the pagoda one after another. They only saw that the inside of the pagoda was filled with dense Xian energy. Moreover, as they walked up to a higher level, they could feel that the Xian energy was even more powerful. In their eyes, they all felt admiration for Jiyu as their sect leader. The Jinsheng sect should have changed their sect leader long ago. The old fart from before was completely delaying the development of their sect. Jiyu naturally did not know what these disciples were thinking, but their thoughts were not in Jiyu's mind. As the surrounding dark force poured in, many disciples hovered in place. Jiyu took the treasure into his hands and flew to the top of the pagoda in a flash. He raised his head and said indifferently, "7th grade array formation, earth overturning array formation." After shouting this sentence, a huge 5-star light appeared from the ground. The 5-star light seemed to be released in the blink of an eye. At this moment, the 2 dark forces colluded together. At this moment, the formation exploded the entire pagoda. At this moment, Jiyu took a step forward and disappeared in the blink of an eye. In the next moment, Jiyu flew up. Looking at Jiyu slowly coming in front of them, their faces were full of surprise. After the entire ground was covered by the light emitted by the pagoda, Within the pagoda, there was only a burst of light, and Jiyu took 2 steps back in the blink of an eye, disappearing from the spot. His array covered the entire pagoda. Jiyu said lightly, "The array has locked on." He walked out of the pagoda in another direction and said to the people beside him, "Everyone, you can retreat now." After Jiyu's words, they disappeared in an instant. They raised their heads and looked in Jiyu's direction. At this moment, a few elders walked out. They cupped their hands and said, "Sect leader is really amazing. We are impressed." 2 people from the dragon-slaying gang also came forward. "Sect leader, we found what you need." They respectfully handed a small secret order to Jiyu. Jiyu received the name card and disappeared in an instant. After a moment, Jiyu slowly took a step forward. 18 golden arits. After hearing Jiyu's Chinese language, they instantly appeared in the same place and knelt on the ground. They cupped their hands and said to Jiyu in front of them, "Greetings, young master. Follow me." After Jiyu's words, they followed behind Jiyu. After a moment, they followed behind Jiyu and disappeared in an instant. Jiyu instantly flew to the pagoda. Ding! The host used the dark forest. Including Jiyu, a total of 19 figures landed on the trees, not far away. They stood in a row on the trees and looked into the huge cave residence. They landed on the ground with a trace of vigilance in their eyes. The Ice Queen's divided soul was in the cave residence. When she saw that there were many people outside the cave residence, she looked up with a trace of vigilance in her eyes. After saying this, he disappeared in an instant. After a moment, he flew in front of Jiyu. He took out a precious weapon and directly slashed at Jiyu. Jiyu slowly raised her hand and directly held the precious weapon in front of her with 2 fingers. "You really came." After saying this, Jiyu said indifferently, "Not bad. I'm here. Come back with us. I need freedom. I want freedom." The Ice Queen's soul fragments were not weak. They disappeared in an instant. In the next moment, they charged in Jiyu's direction. Their eyes were filled with killing intent as they charged in Jiyu's direction. Jiyu jumped up and flew in front of the Ice Queen. She flew down and directly gathered all the dark force in her palm. In the next moment, the dark force in Jiyu's palm slammed heavily on the thick gang chi. As Jiyu's dark force slammed down, it was accompanied by a loud bang. At this moment, a cloud of black fog floated in the sky. Originally, the Ice Queen's divided soul did not have a precious weapon. However, after she killed her way to the sect, she killed all the experts above the elder level of this small sect, and even snatched the precious weapon that had been passed down for hundreds of years. After seeing the precious weapon in Jiyu's hand, the Ice Queen's divided soul's eyes lit up. Her body flashed, and she disappeared on the spot. After a moment, she picked up the precious weapon in front of her and grabbed the sword hilt. The Ice Queen directly rushed in the direction of Jiyu. He leaped 2 to 3 meters into the air. Raging Inferno. Ding! Host used Raging Inferno. Obtained 1 by 999 experience points. Raging flames burst out from the Koan Pung giant sword, producing 2 balls of fire. They fell like a meteor shower. The balls of fire fell heavily. The Ice Queen's divided soul let out an angry roar and waved the precious weapon in her hand. At this moment, countless ice spikes burst out rapidly. Those ice spikes quickly fell in the direction of Jiyu. Jiyu's gang chi covered the front of her. Those ice spikes pierced her gang chi at this time, reducing the impact of the ice spikes by more than half. He waved his 2 fingers in front of him and quickly absorbed the dark force in the icicle with his gang chi. With a wave of his sword finger, the 2 enormous Xian energies collided with each other at this moment. Chapter 689. The huge array floated in the air. Jiyu glanced at the huge array formation in front of him and instantly disappeared from where he was. Holding the Kuan Pung giant sword in his hand, he immediately flew up. The formation gradually rippled on the ground, covering the entire ground and slowly spreading out. He jumped up, picked up the giant sword beside him, and charged in Jiyu's direction. The Kuan Peng giant sword collided with the other party's hand. There was a huge explosion. There was a loud boom. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared on the spot. The person in front of her looked at Jiyu in shock, a look of shock on his face. Jiyu threw the Kuan Peng giant sword into the sky, and it split into countless giant swords. The power of the Kuan Peng fell instantly. They all collided with the Queen of Ice's soul. Boom, boom, boom. 3 loud sounds were heard, and smoke floated out. Along with a gentle breeze, it began to move. The thick smoke dispersed, and the human and soul looked at each other. Jiyu's gaze was deep. His body flashed, and at this moment, he appeared in front of the other party. His gaze was locked on Jiyu's direction. The Queen of Ice didn't understand why this human kept chasing after her. Jiyu summoned the soul in the spirit rope and said calmly, "Your soul seems to be eager for freedom. So what? Without her, I can't recover." The spirit rope was protesting violently. In an instant, he disappeared from his spot. In the next moment, the treasure weapon in his hand collided with the treasure weapon of the other party. Along with a cracking sound, the treasure weapon emitted a cracking sound. In an instant, the treasure turned into fragments. At this moment, the fragments floated up and exploded in an instant. At this moment, the fragments quickly fell in Jiyu's direction. Jiyu raised his hand. The fiery battle robe on his body fluttered without wind and floated up. With a fierce cloak of fire, Jiyu disappeared on the spot. A moment later, he raised the treasure in his hand and swung it down heavily. The 2 treasures collided in an instant. There was a violent explosion in the surroundings. Whether it was Jiyu or the Queen of Ice's people, in an instant there was a cracking sound. The moment the 2 Xian energies clashed, a crackling sound could be heard. The surrounding lightning bolts fell to the side and ignited the flames in an instant. At this moment, the raging flames started to burn towards the surroundings. The entire forest was set ablaze. At this moment, the entire cave was turned into ashes. Jiyu landed on the ground and looked in front of him. He instantly disappeared on the spot and pulled out the treasure. The Queen of Ice's soul didn't expect Jiyu to be so powerful. 2 bursts of profound strength erupted in an instant, and the enormous profound strength slowly collided at this moment. Accompanied by the sound of the explosion, they gradually fell. Jiyu flew up and said indifferently, "If you don't make a move, she will run away again." The Queen of Ice flew out and then put on a violent demonstration of hitting herself. Jiyu didn't care so much. Taking the opportunity, he pulled out the Queen of Ice's soul and injected her soul into the other party. He stood up and glanced in front of him. Jiyu turned around and flew out of the spot in the blink of an eye. He directly slapped the other party's body. At this moment, the soul in the other party's body pulled out her consciousness and injected the soul into a small treasure. If there was a chance in the future, he would find a suitable soul for her. After losing her consciousness, the Queen of Ice's soul was similar to the other souls. They were only left with the instinct to fight. Their eyes were fixed on Jiyu. Kill, kill, kill. Only the sound of killing was left. She floated her body and came in front of Jiyu. She raised her hand and waved the treasure weapon at the Queen of Ice's body. However, the Queen of Ice didn't have a physical body at the moment. She wouldn't be hurt by this or at all. Jiyu turned around and took out 5 treasures from his storage ring. These treasures were used to store souls, and he began to absorb the Xian energy from them. He shot out his spiritual power in an instant. The mental strength wrapped around the other party's body and locked it tightly. The bones in the other party's body were constantly breaking, and he let out a series of screams. At this moment, all the Xian Qi in her body was injected into the Queen of Ice's body. After absorbing the Queen of Ice's soul, she revealed a smile like a young girl. She smiled faintly and said, "I didn't expect that I would still be unable to recover after obtaining the power of 3 souls. Perhaps I can only obtain that power in the main hall of the Hall of Evolution, but I'm afraid that I won't be able to defeat her. After thousands of years, the power of the 3rd soul has developed intelligence. I'm afraid that something bad will happen in the future. After saying this, Jiyu turned around and said coldly, "So what? You're afraid of yourself. I'm here." The Queen of Ice picked him up like a little girl and kissed him. It wasn't her fault because Jiyu knew very well that in her heart, Jiyu turned around and disappeared instantly. He said faintly, "Aren't you the high and mighty Queen of Ice? There's no other way. I've taken back my soul. That's it. It'll take some time for her to integrate into my main personality." Hearing this, the corners of Jiyu's lips curled up in a helpless smile. The dark forest appeared once again as a human, and a soul flew out continuously. The matter here was considered to have come to an end. Jiyu stood up and said faintly, "Let's go to the north and take back your last soul." Riding on the horse, he quickly drove the horse and galloped forward. Not long after, they arrived at the border. Jiyu pulled on the reins in her hand and looked at the border. Countless flames and thick smoke were rising from the huge city walls. Along with the black smoke, they flew up continuously. Countless people riding on Xian beasts came to the front of the border. The great general of the southern region rode on his horse and kept neighing. Chapter 690. The southern region great general pulled on the reins in his hand, and his horse neighed. Along with the neighing, an army of cultivators slowly walked out and stood at the foot of the city walls. A young man in white stood on top of the city walls. He stared coldly at the foot of the city walls. Along with the sound of drums, rows of soldiers slowly walked forward. He raised his hand high into the air. Loud rumbling sounds could be heard. Countless spears flew out at the same time. Dark energy was infused into the spears, and they struck the city walls. The city walls were about to collapse. The young man in white on top of the city walls raised his hand high. In the next moment, his energy covered the city walls. He was able to gather the energy of so many people and convert it into his own energy. In the next instant, they turned their heads around and saw that the streams of astral energy were gradually descending and blocking the city walls. Suddenly, the city walls began to collapse. Jiyu turned around. He slowly took a step forward. He had to enter the city, no matter what. The southern region great general didn't seem to have many tricks up his sleeve. After the first wave of spears, they all struck the city walls. The spears fell into the energy and fell to the ground. He wasn't too anxious. He raised the spear in his hand and shouted, "Follow me." After shouting those words, they swarmed forward. They came under the aura chi. Although they had gathered powerful aura chi, they lifted it up and waved it out at the same time. After the heavy impact, a crack appeared on the city walls. The energy shattered into pieces at this moment. Whooshing sounds could be heard as they rode their mystical beasts to the foot of the city walls. The mystical beasts used their claws to grab hold of the city walls and climbed up to land on the city walls. They landed on the city walls and pulled out their weapons. Loud explosions could be heard from the energy. The young men in white on top of the city walls raised their hands. With a wave of their hands, the young men on top of the city walls ran forward and jumped to the ground. They raised their hands and pointed their swords at the southern region soldiers. After shouting "Kill!", the soldiers from both sides were entangled with each other, and the ground was littered with corpses in a pool of blood. Jiyu took a step forward, and the majority of the people here were using mystical skills. Her entire body flashed and disappeared from her original position. After a moment, Jiyu released her mystical skill, and with a boom, she shot out explosively. He waved his hand forward. Ding! The host used Raging Inferno and gained 1 by 999 experience points. Jiyu disappeared from his spot. He turned around and slowly took a step forward. A treasure appeared in his hand as he waved his sword. The Kuan Peng's artifact spirit flew up. A ball of fire emerged from the fire and sprayed into the Gang Chi. The flames seemed to have the power to never be extinguished. The white-robed young man looked in the direction of Jiyu as he devoured the earth energy around him. Why is this fellow targeting my faction? Who exactly was he? The people from the southern region were also very surprised. Why would a profound realm expert appear? Jiyu slowly took a step forward and waved the Kuan Peng giant sword in his hand. Suddenly, the Kuan Peng giant sword in his hand shot out flames once again. The flames burned on top of the city walls. The city walls were burned red by the flames and gradually melted. When they saw this, the people around them all rushed forward. They rode their Shin beasts and slowly advanced forward. When the southern region's great general saw that the city walls had collapsed, he was overjoyed. He roared out in joy, "Kill!" After roaring this sentence, they rushed into the city walls. The Shin cultivators inside the city walls were simply watching the show. They didn't care who became the king. The corners of their mouths curled into a smile. Under the roar of "Kill!" another group of people rushed out. This was the last protective force in the city. If this group of people couldn't expel them, they could only fall in a pool of blood. The people from the southern region rushed forward. They raised the weapons in their hands and chopped at the necks of their opponents. A stream of blood flowed out from their necks. They disappeared on the spot. The people from both sides jumped down to the bottom of the city walls. They raised their hands and charged towards the people inside the city walls. A sea of blood could be called a sea of blood. The people on both sides stood in the tall city towers and watched everything. Jiyu also took this opportunity to jump onto a mystical beast. She followed the mystical beasts and rushed into the city walls. When the soldiers saw Jiyu, they also rushed in. They all rushed in the direction of Jiyu. He grasped the weapon beside him and jumped up. He looked at the people who were charging towards him and waved the weapon in his hand. Along with the explosion of Shin energy, the two of them each took a step back. Jiyu turned around and waved her weapon heavily. Boom! A loud sound rang out. They were sent flying. A few soldiers raised their hands and charged toward Jiyu. Jiyu turned around and stabbed her sword in their direction. Jiyu picked up the weapon in her hand and suddenly turned around. She slashed the weapon in her hand across the necks of those soldiers. Blood immediately flowed to the ground. The people from the southern region followed Jiyu into the city walls and locked their gazes on Jiyu. The southern region's generals didn't know who this person was, but since he appeared here and had such a powerful force, he was definitely not an ordinary person. They shouted loudly, "Kill!" After shouting out these words, the two groups of people began to fight. The southern region's general walked in front of Jiyu and cupped his hands. He said politely, "Everyone, we will protect him and retreat." After shouting these words, everyone ran forward. A few people stood in front of Jiyu and protected her. Under the attack of the flames blocked the earth energy. Gradually, the flames started to spread in all directions. Jiyu wanted to block the attacks, but she didn't expect them to use their lives to block Jiyu's flames. Jiyu said calmly, "You?" When the southern region's general heard Jiyu's words, he said, "Young man, this battle is our business. It has nothing to do with you. Hurry up and retreat." You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.